Good morning and welcome to County of Frontenac's special meeting for Friday, October the 24th. County of North Frontenac, the Township of North Frontenac, sorry, I'm getting them mixed up. I have. Thank you for being the deputy mayor. Okay. Please be advised, North Frontenac council meetings are recorded. By attending a public meeting of council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Members of council, staff, delegates, and attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and or unacceptable behavior or comment. The traditional land acknowledgement. We begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place of the first peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the Township of North Frontenac is committed to working with indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. Approval of the agenda?
Moved by Councilor Hermer, seconded by Councilor Fowler. Be it resolved that council approves the agenda for the special meeting dated October 24th, 2025 as listed.
Comments? You're in favor? That meeting is carried, or that motion is carried. Is there any disclosure between your interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none. Closed session.
Moved by Councilor Fowler, seconded by Councilor Hermer. Be it resolved that council moves into closed session at 9:03 a.m. pursuant to the following subsections of the Municipal Act. Section 239(2), D, a proposed dependent acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality and local board. Act advice to be subject to client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. I, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor related information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which is disclosed to reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of the purchase, group of persons or organization, and K, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instructions to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. More specifically, to discuss a potential battery energy storage system project, including a potential opportunity.
Comments? In favor? We have to ask the council chamber.
Okay, so for those that are online, if you can just remove yourself from the meeting, then you can rejoin when the open meeting will begin at 10:30. If you do not remove yourself, then you will need to re-register.
Okay, folks, microphones. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We just came out of a closed session of council in which we discussed a potential battery energy storage system with the Township of North Frontenac, including a potential option agreement. Okay. So we are fortunate today to have Lisa Asbrook from Cunningham Swan with us. She provided a presentation to council, and she's going to provide a presentation for everyone in the room to view and understand and so on. Lisa, the floor is yours. We can do that. There you go.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Let's start this right. If this is supposed to be all about civility, we've been on Engaged Frontenac. It's been in front of council several times. We've had 2 open houses, one of them really well attended, one of them well attended. And we're doing this as a final shot. This is a very, very important project that could reshape the way North Frontenac moves forward. And if we can't keep it civil and under control, then we'll just have to clear the council chamber and we'll just end it. And I don't want to do that, ever want to do that. We want to hear your final comments on this. It's so important that we hear from you. So you're on deck.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. My name is Lisa Asbrook. I'm an energy lawyer. And the reason I'm here today, and I've been helping advise and answer questions for the township and the elected officials, is because I have been working in this space for 18 or 19 years across Canada as an energy lawyer, and have seen and been involved in many projects that got developed and many projects that did not get developed. I'm here to try and answer questions and give you an honest assessment of the legal process that a project like this faces, and some comments about the difference between a good developer and a bad developer, a good project and a bad project. I am a rural person myself. My background, I worked on Bay Street for many years at top law firm in Canada, in Toronto and in Calgary, and then I moved back home to raise my family. I'm from the rural area, and I see these energy projects coming to rural communities across the country, and the rural communities not always having the resources or the expertise to be able to react or understand them. So that's why I moved back home to this area. My father was an elected official in a rural township for over 20 years. We're a farm family. I grew up on a farm. So that's my background. Now I act for landowners. Okay. I know all these developers. I'm in meetings in Toronto very often with all of these developers, the national, the multinational players, but I don't act for them anymore. I change sides and I act for landowners and for municipalities. So you have a chance to have someone negotiate your contracts that knows what's going on as well, if people want projects. That's my role in all this. I'm not a decision maker. I'm here to tell you that if people do want a project, you have a fighting chance of putting your best foot forward in the negotiation for the site and all the contracts and negotiations that come after that. Okay, so I'm going to get into the presentation, and I think questions will probably be queued to the end. I know there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to go a little bit fast so I don't take up too much time. There's 2 things that the councillors are being asked to decide in the next week or so. Not today. Today's just about hearing everyone out, and they'll have to decide, I think, next week. 2 things are the option agreement. The township owns the land where Electra has asked if they could have an option to lease those lands to put a project there. Okay, so that's decision number 1. Is the township going to sign up an option agreement giving Electra an option to lease that site for that? Decision number 2 that they have to make in the next week or so is, are they going to pass a municipal support resolution? That's a bit of a misnomer. We didn't create that name. That's a name that's out there in the province. The support resolution is not for support of the project on hold just yet. It is support for Electra to bid. Okay, I'm going to talk about what they're bidding for in a minute in this whole provincial procurement process that's underway. But that's all the township is being asked to decide. Do they give an option to Electra for that land to lease it? And do they give an indicative early stage support resolution, which would support Electra bidding in a project to try and get a contract from the government. To be very clear, Electra is not going to build a project if they don't get a government contract. Okay, the government has a bid process open right now. We're going to talk about that. The bids are due in December. Contracts will get decided next year. They would not have a good bid and may not have a bid at all if they don't get these two things. There's a bunch of other things they need to, but these are important to them. Okay, what is the site, the option agreement? I just touched on that. It is a legally binding agreement to grant them an option to lease the site if it proceeds. It's kind of weird, but they all start out this way. Any project in Ontario for electricity generation or storage assets all starts out this way, where they just take an option to lease the land initially because they don't want to sign a 20 or 25-year lease just yet because they don't know if the project's going to go ahead or not. So it's just an option for now, and you get paid for the option. And we talked about that support resolution. Okay, they need that support resolution to be able to bid. It's just saying that the township is satisfied that a community engagement has been occurring, that Electra engaged the community. They did not ignore the community. They did not just go ahead and bid without talking to everyone and holding meetings. The government has an expectation in this process that anyone proposing a project is engaging with the community. Okay, what's not happening yet? No one here knows if there's going to be a project yet or not. Electra does not know that yet. A lot of things have to come together first that are beyond the control of everyone in this room. So what's not happening yet? There's no permitting happening yet. And that all remains to be determined at a future date. Projects not approved. Nobody here is approving any project today. In fact, the regulatory approvals for the project or potential project haven't even been submitted yet. The regulatory requirements that will need to be met are many. They would include some stuff from provincial ministries, including the MECP. That's the new name for the Ministry of the Environment. Many people would know it as the Ministry of the Environment. It's now called the Ministry of Environment and Parks and whatnot. The Conservation Authority will have to review everything. And the township has Land Use Planning Act Authority, Planning Act Authority again. If any of you remember some of the FIT projects that got built between 2010 and 2014, those were built under the Green Energy Act and a whole bunch of stuff that happened then. The Green Energy Act gutted municipal land use planning authority, and that was very contentious. Many of you will remember that. Municipalities were not happy about it. The public was not happy about it. It went that way for different reasons. That's history now. The Green Energy Act was repealed. What that means is that land use planning powers of the municipality are restored. So the municipality will be looking at this from a land use planning perspective if it goes ahead, just like they would any other industrial development, just like they would anything else that got proposed subject to the Planning Act. Many of you are familiar with those processes. You know, it could be official plan amendment, could be rezoning, could be site plan approval. It depends on what it triggers, probably site plan approval for this, but you'll have to talk to planners at the time, and it would be considered on its merits at the time in that process. There's other things in those regulatory approvals that will come later that would look at sound and setbacks and whatnot as well, if it proceeds. And they all have public consultation in all of those processes with those regulators. So what's going on? You probably have seen or heard about this in the news. The backstory is pretty much no generation assets were built in Ontario between about 2014, 2015, and very recently, like last year. So you had about 8 years of the government not procuring much of anything for new generation or storage on the grid. And about 10 years before anything new could be built by the time they started procuring again. That's a long time. That is a very long time for a system the size of Ontario. I've been an electricity lawyer my whole career, and there's been a lot of population growth in Ontario, a lot of load growth, a lot of there's electrification of things starting. And Ontario desperately, quite frankly, needs power. There's nukes coming off, and they've announced a new big nuclear program that will go on for 25 years. I think that's beyond the scope of this meeting or anyone in this room to comment on, but when they commit to these big things and these big other decisions, what it means is in the interim, they need assets on the grid. They need them. And you can read the ISO planning reports if you want to read more about that. So we're in a world now where they are procuring. They ran a long-term procurement one, the expedited version called ELT1. They ran that late 2023, 2024. That was basically emergent. It was basically an expedited, almost emergency timeline to get some stuff built. That was new gas turbines, went in a few spots, and batteries. They ran LT1, long-term procurement one, again, gas and batteries. Basically, they're just trying to strengthen the grid to keep the lights on kind of thing in areas. And now they're running a bigger program called LT2, long-term procurement 2. It's going to happen in 4 waves at least. I believe it's the biggest electricity procurement for like multiple technologies in Ontario's history, and it's just beginning now. We're in long-term procurement 2, LT2. Sorry for all the acronyms. LT2, we're in wave 1 right now this year. And so the project proponents are starting to get stuff organized and bid. I'm sure you've seen lots of public meetings across the province. There's solar and other technologies popping back up again in other places. There's batteries popping up in some places. It's all about where they can get connected to the grid or think they can. And so there's capacity, or so they believe, according to test data on this line through here. So it's a pretty big economic opportunity for this region. If people are willing, there will be proponents that want to get on that line and that want to bid in LT2. Some stuff was already submitted last week for new generation, and the storage gets to bid in December. The battery proponents across the province get to bid in December, wherever they want to try to get a contract. Again, I apologize for all the acronyms. This industry is kind of full of acronyms, but a couple important ones are the IESO, the Independent Electricity System Operator for Ontario. That's the grid operator. Okay, the grid operator runs all this planning and procurement, and they run the grid. LT2, the RFP is the bidding process. It's like a massive province-wide tender that's going on right now. And unlike the FIT program a long time ago was fixed price contracts, and they were fairly lucrative because they were trying to create a new industry. This is not like that. This is competitive, and it's why we had to have the closed meeting this morning and why we had to talk about the financial numbers in a closed meeting, because it's a very competitive process right now amongst proponents across the province, and the numbers are all highly confidential and proprietary because it's all feeding into their bid prices, and the contracts the proponents that bid in projects with the lowest prices will presumably get the contracts. Price is the leading factor in that tender process. So that's good for ratepayers, like for taxpayers across the province, that they're running these competitive processes, because the prices of these technologies and these projects have come way down everywhere in the world, and the prices are coming in like very, very competitively, we're seeing. I'm just going to skip that. We can come back to this if we want to, but basically, for those of you who follow the electricity sector, there's a difference between energy and capacity. Energy is the kind of stuff you put on the grid that generates power. May or may not be dispatchable. It just generates power, puts it on. Capacity is the kind of assets you put on the grid that are dispatchable. So the grid operator can say when they want them. Okay, natural gas is a big one, and batteries are a big one because they can store and release the electrons when needed. It's no secret that we have peaking times at certain times in Ontario. So it's really important to have those dispatchable assets too, to be able to get the electrons at the peaking times when they're needed. So if you're a company like Electra, what's it take to propose a project and maybe be successful? These are the big legs I see of a project. Any one of these, you don't have any one of these, you're not going anywhere. Okay. You need all of these and many more, but these are the big things. You need a contract with an off-taker. You need a buyer for that power for 20 some years. Nobody builds merchant projects in Ontario. Nobody builds projects on a wing and a prayer that someone's going to buy the power at some certain price in the future. That does not happen in Ontario. Okay. Nobody build, it's because our prices are not that predictable. They need a contract where they know the price and they know the buyer for a long term to make this thing financeable, to make any project financeable, right? There hasn't been one in almost a decade. That's why this stuff matters now. The IESO is procuring these, is offering contracts. So they're basically 20-year long-term contracts that they'll buy that power if people will build projects. It's all about that. That's the elephant in the room. Nothing happens without that contract. So that's what they're bidding for. You also need an experienced and financeable developer. I see all kinds of developers. We've negotiated across from every single one. And I'll tell you what I told council this morning. There are some we'd run out of town. They're terrible. They're not credible. They're not right. They're not fair to the landowners. And we don't want to see them in Eastern Ontario because there are enough good companies that are here and willing and able to do business with people in Eastern Ontario that we've had tremendous success negotiating good contracts with good companies. So we like to see people that are financeable, experienced team, credible in the community, proven track record, uneventful, no problems. Electra is far down that end of the spectrum in terms of like top shelf developers. I'm not here to judge what everybody wants to do. I'm just here to tell you that if you had to pick a company to consider allowing to do a project in your community, they are far down that end of the spectrum of the best ones. Okay, the 3 or 4 that we recommend in a community like this. They also have the added advantage of being municipally owned LDC, local distribution company. They've got municipality in their DNA. They've got community in their DNA. They're not just a private company. So they live or die by public perception as well of what they're doing out there. And then they need a willing host landowner. Here it just happens to also be the township, but it could have been any one of you that own land. They could have approached any one of you that own land near that line, under that line, and offered you a lucrative contract to host. My phone rings off the hook from landowners who want to host projects, actually. Here it's the municipality has to decide if they're going to give them rights to that land. They also need a supportive municipality, and that's where that municipal support resolution came in. It's just indicative at this early stage, but they need that to have a good looking bid. They need, for all practical purposes, not a legal requirement, but for all practical purposes for these bids, they get points and they're viewed more favorably if they have an Indigenous equity partner in the project company, and Electra has a pattern and habit of doing that. My understanding is they're negotiating that right now and they believe it'll come together. You can ask them that if you want to. We're not a party to that contract. The township is not a party to that contract and doesn't need to be involved in that. But certainly the expectation and the pattern of good companies like this in Ontario is that they have Indigenous equity ownership in the project. They also need interconnection capacity. That's Hydro One Grid. That is a big black box and a very big ticket item that will make or break this project. Along with the ISO contract, they need to be able to get on that grid at the size that they want and at a price tag that the project can bid and afford. And then they also need all the other regulatory approvals we talked about. Touched on this, project siting is a volunteer sport. They cannot, meaning If the township wants to allow them on this site, the township would be doing so voluntarily. Electra cannot compel it, cannot force them to lease this site to them, and cannot expropriate it. That's different than a lot of other kinds of energy projects and a lot of other kinds of infrastructure. You know, everywhere across Canada, if there was a pipeline coming through, or a railroad or a road or a bridge or whatever, a lot of those other kinds of energy have expropriation, and infrastructure have expropriation powers. Battery companies, renewable energy companies, and private energy companies do not. So anywhere that they're going to locate, it's because the landowner wanted and allowed it. And it was on terms that the landowner agreed to. So the reason why I put this slide up is because, just to put all this in perspective, that's why we're able to negotiate the lease on the terms the township wants. If they want to proceed, we get to actually negotiate that, because we can say no. With these key legal requirements for the project that I talked about, this slide just shows you how that manifests into a contract, like into the legal components that the developer needs. So, you know, they need that buyer. Well, that's the ISO contract. They need to be experienced themselves. Well, the true test is whether they get financed, because nobody is getting hundreds of millions of dollars of construction financing from a lender unless the lender believes that they can do it and do it right and do it on time. And that level of like, I've worked on Bay Street for Lenders Council and on these projects, that level of due diligence and scrutiny that they go through to get that construction financing is like nothing else in Canada that you've ever seen. These are the highest risk things to lend to for construction financing. And so that is the ultimate test of your proponent and the merits and integrity and timing and cost of the project. The landowner host, that manifests itself in the option agreement, the accepting municipality. For now, it's just the MSR, the municipal support resolution, if the township wants to give it. But it doesn't stop there, because we have recommended that the township also, if and when this proceeds, like a later date, if and when this proceeds, they would negotiate a community benefit agreement. It's premature to negotiate it yet, but it's best practice now. It's not legally required, but it's best practice. And Electra didn't have to agree to it, but they have. So we've kind of telegraphed to them already and said, we got to have these meetings, see what happens with the decision. But if the township is going to do anything favorable at this stage, you need to know we're going to require a community benefit agreement if this goes ahead. They have agreed. We've agreed to some floor numbers in that. Okay, so I'll talk about that in a minute. Their Indigenous partner, they'll figure that out in the equity agreement. Hydro One, they'll figure out in the interconnection agreement, and whether that kind of green lights or kills the project. And there'll be many regulatory authorities and approvals and permits. Here's where we are in the process. So right now, that first bullet, early stage pre-development, that's Electra running around spending a lot of money trying to figure out if this is a viable project or not. And they're doing that. It's in multiple places across Ontario. It's not just here. They also already have I'll let them, they're coming on here, I think, if needed in the meeting. They'll have to speak to how many they've already built and put online if you're interested. But they do have a proven track record. Where we are here today, where your council is here today in the process, is deciding site access. Do you grant that option agreement? And do you grant municipal support? So you see how early we are in the process. And then Electra will do the things in black. They'll figure out their Indigenous support. They have to figure out if there's sufficient interconnection capacity. Then they bid. Okay, if they bid this year, it goes in December. If they can't get the bid together in time, they'll probably take a run at next year, I would assume. Same drill. Which I think from a legal perspective, I would say everyone would be indifferent. If it's a year later, it'd be the same drill, same very same or similar project and application. It would just maybe be more organized bid, better chance. And then they'll have to wait for the ISO to decide if they get a contract or not. There's no guarantee they get a contract if they bid. This is very competitive. More people lose than win in those bids. And then if they get a contract, they'll go into all that permitting stage. They won't spend the money to do that unless they get a contract. And then if they get through all their permits and they negotiate a community benefit agreement with the municipality that everybody's happy with, then they might be able to close their construction financing and construct, energize, COD, commercial operation date. That's the process. That process takes years. Okay, I don't see that process taking less than 2 years, could take several more. What's in the option agreement? We cannot talk about the financial terms for many reasons under municipal law, under contract law, and because of the integrity of the bidding process. The proponents are all, it's all proprietary, the numbers that are going into their bids that they're bidding their projects in at. So I cannot talk about numbers here today, but they will pay the municipality a certain amount per year for that option agreement, just to have an option on the land. I'm aware of option pricing across Ontario just because I negotiate so many of these, and the option price is good and fair, pretty good, actually. So no concerns from me on that. The number they led with was fair, and we had some back and forth, and that's not no concern, no legal concerns. It's more than fair market value. Yeah, they would be giving an option to lease the land. The township can't change their mind on that option once they give it. And the decision lies with Electra of whether they proceed or not. They don't know yet if they will proceed. If they do get a contract and all those things happen and they exercise their option, then they would go into a lease term, and that is a long-term lease. Okay, probably be 23 or 25 years with extension rights. It's a long-term lease. The option doesn't go on forever. We got it whittled down to 3 years, which is very good. And I don't think they loved that at it, but they did ultimately agree to it. So they only get the option for 3 years. So they have to take a real run at this quickly, not just land bank, not just park on it indefinitely. So they have 3 years. If they get a contract, it could be a bit longer. It could go a couple of years longer, but it doesn't go on indefinitely. And if any of you are landowners in this room and you get approached for those, be careful about that, please. You don't want people land banking or parking on your land. Not much will happen during the option period because they're doing all their running around in Toronto trying to figure out all the other stuff. So you may not see anything happening much at all on the site. Maybe some consultants, environmental scientists, like people just poking around and looking at the site and whatnot, but that's about it. There won't be any big activity. Then the lease itself it has to get all negotiated now in advance because you have to know the form of lease that you're kind of pre-agreeing to. So that's all been done. So we know what's in the lease right now. I can't talk about all the legal and financial terms, but we know what's in it right now. And I can tell you it's fair market value or fair market or better than fair market on all the terms. That's what we've been working on negotiating to see what they would give. And the rent is very good for the township every year. It represents a long-term revenue stream essentially for the township, and the amount will depend on the number of acres they build on. These are very energy dense, so they probably don't need that many acres. They're now talking like minimum 10. That's not a maximum, by the way, but they're going to option 44 acres because they need room to figure out their design because they're not sure the setbacks from a bunch of edges right now. They need to option the 44 acres. That's fine because the township gets paid for those 44 acres to option. So that's not a bad thing, but they're not going to build on all 44 acres. They're probably going to build on 10 or something like that. I don't want to limit them right now, but just to give you the general sense, a 140 megawatt project just doesn't need that much more these days. With the way the units go. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's 10 or 15 acres. We negotiated decommissioning financial security in that lease, which is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart and has been almost like my life's work in a small way, trying to get decommissioning financial security in for landowners. As long as I've been working on this in Ontario, and that it just wasn't possible a decade ago, and it's possible now. The market has changed, and we have been more fiercely negotiating these things. And they have agreed to decommissioning financial security. And what that means is at the end of the time for the project, they must remove everything at their cost. And if they don't, there will be money that the township will be able to access that they don't need their permission for in a mechanism that we lawyers are happy with. And the township will have the money and the right amount of the money to be able to remove these and decommission if they had to, in that kind of worst case scenario. That is game changer. In Ontario, I recommend it for everyone now, but it wasn't always the case for everything. And there's other examples across Canada where people wish they had and don't have that kind of decommissioning security. So I think that's one of the very most important things. And they have agreed to what we asked. They offered a CBA, as we mentioned. They don't have to, they're not required by law, but they've offered a community benefits agreement. And the numbers in there that they led with were basically the same numbers that everybody's leading with across Ontario. So nothing earth shattering. We said, yeah, for sure, we'll take that, but we asked for more. And they've agreed to some higher numbers as well, as the years go by on the project. The community benefits agreement does not actually get fully negotiated yet. I wish it did, but it just doesn't. That's not the way project development works in Ontario. It's premature at this point. It would get negotiated if things proceed. You kind of want to see what's important to the community, the things that come out during the regulatory process anyways, in my opinion, to know what is most important, what you really maybe want in your regulatory conditions or in that community benefits agreement. I don't think it's any secret in this room, but one of the things that we've been all over from the get-go, and I think the community has been all over from the get-go, is just making sure that there's a good fire safety plan, emergency response plan in place, like you would for any other industrial development. And so we've also said to Electra right away that there's going to have to be, proper training and ongoing training and stuff paid for by Electra. And we're going to put it in that community benefits agreement. They know that now. Okay, so that's out there and they've been agreeable to that concept. The CBA won't get negotiated right now, so we're just putting in place an MOU. It's not legally binding, sorry, but that's the way the whole process works. You're not allowed to create more conditions on the municipal support resolution right now, otherwise it won't count with the ISO in the bid. So I can't put more hard legal conditions in right now, so we do it in a soft MOU, but at least it captures in writing what the expectation is on both sides. So the key terms I just talked about would be that there would be a community benefit fund, like amount of money that they're going to pay to the township every year. The township will decide how that gets spent for the most part, but they'll also probably create some sort of community benefit fund. It's up to them how you want to call it, or what you want to call it, or how you want to administer that money. But there would be extra money available to the community. I have experience with these because we've negotiated them and they've been running for a long time in other places where there's big energy projects, and they actually pile up. Like, it's a lot of money available to the community and to groups and projects in the community. And then we try and get some fire safety emergency planning stuff in there according to what your first responders and your fire chief are saying are critical. If you hadn't heard of a CBA before, community benefits agreement, I've been presenting on these for a little while across Ontario. It's, I think that they're a nice tool to use when an energy project development company comes to the area, because it's a tool you don't have in the land use planning process to start capturing money to go into municipal coffers and resources that can be redistributed in the community, so that there's more of a shared benefit from this extra money. Yeah. the purpose of it is to document what they're promising and help make sure that the community is compensated for any impact that is felt by the community on whole. And I will say, like, this is in addition to the standard stuff, like if roads are damaged during construction, they pay to fix them all and all that. Like that will also be discussed and papered in other legal agreements. This is on top of all the required legal agreements. And it helps balance benefits and impact in the community. And it can have lasting benefits for everyone. And when these are well done, they end up kind of being like a long-term partner in the community and a long-term part of the community and the extra money that is in. So, you know, the nuclear industry has been doing this to the nth degree in certain pockets of Ontario for a long time, and the dollars are astronomical that have gone into those communities because of it. And other developers, you know, not as big as nuclear, obviously, but other technologies and other projects are starting to realize that this is a cost of doing business. In my opinion, it's a cost of doing business in a community. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted you to think about as you engage with council. Ontario is committed to a very serious energy build out right now. There's lots written about this right now. Transmission capacity in certain areas of the province is now determinative. There's very little transmission capacity around the GTA, north of Toronto or southwestern Ontario. It's mostly saturated. North is far. Eastern Ontario has the majority of the interconnection capacity now. This was foreseeable for a while, but it's why there's a bit of a gold rush going on around us. These things are coming. They're coming across the province. They're coming disproportionately to our area. You can either decide if your community and your site is appropriate and open for business and wants these or not. And they will react accordingly, but they're coming and they're getting approved and supported all over the place. So that is the choice as a community you get to make. So we're here to help rural communities navigate what's good deal, what's bad deal, what's good project, what's bad project, and what you want to do when you're given an opportunity to react to this. And I will say, I've recommended against many, not them all. So I'll just give you that balanced perspective. I would tell you if there's things wrong with the terms or the proposals that are off market. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have the lecture online?
Right.
Okay, I just want to go, okay. So we're into the item 8. Presentation, received the report.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Engel, seconded by Councillor Hudel. Be it resolved that council receives for information the presentation from Lisa Asbrick, partner with Cunningham Swan, entitled Legal Review of the Electric Proposed Battery Energy Storage System Project, and thanks her for her time spent today.
In favor?
Read again.
Yeah, read it again.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Engel, seconded by Councillor Hudel. Be it resolved, the council receives for information the presentation from Lisa Asbrick, partner with Cunningham Swan, entitled Legal Review of Electra Proposed Battery Energy Storage Project, and thanks her for her time spent today.
In favor? Motion's carried. Now we're going to go into administrative reports, and this will lead into the public forum. Just going to switch clerical assistants at this point. Is it? Okay. Better? We'll see if we can do better. We come out of this, this is the only issue we have at the end of the day. I'll count it a win. Whenever you're ready. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go into a, we have to do this, sorry. This right here. Did you want to read that, Mike?
Moved by Deputy Mayor Inglis, seconded by Councillor Hudel. Be it resolved that council receives for information the clerk planning manager and public works managers administrative report entitled Battery Energy Storage System Project Update, and that council will consider the municipal support resolution and lease option agreement at the next regular council meeting of council on October 31st, 2025.
Any final comments from councilors? In favor of the resolution? That resolution is carried. So this is going to lead us into the public forum. We're going to start with the resolution, and then I'm going to provide a little bit more background for you, how it's going to work. So we're sure that we get through everybody.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Inglis, seconded by Councillor Hudel. Be it resolved, the council provides that during the public forum, comments will be limited to 2 minutes. No compound or follow-up questions to ensure all public have an opportunity to be heard. And that council includes these provisions as the procedural policy provides for public forum, but does not set out any time provisions.
Council, do you have any comments? In favor? That resolution is carried. So basically what that says is we want to hear from as many of you as possible. So one question each, don't make it like on TV where they go on and on and on and on. We want to hear a succinct question. If I see or hear a lot of repeat questions, I will tell you. And I'll cut you off at about 2 minutes. We have some people online, and I'm going to alternate between in the council chamber and the online people. If you have more than one question, that's great. You have to ask one question and then you go back into the queue. Okay, so the meeting is supposed to be over in 13 minutes. We're going to keep going for as long as reasonably possible. Okay. And decorum is required at all times. So, am I missing anything, Council? We have Lisa staying with us, and we have Electra online. So, okay. All right. Who wants to go first? We're going to start with the council chambers. This gentleman back in the back row. So we're going to use the microphone. This is
All right,
all
we have to use the microphone so the people online can hear your question.
this will all be on YouTube as well.
Question for Lisa. If council were to decide to give the option and then Electra were to go through all of the processes that you have described and get a contract and construction happen and this project came online, if at any time through that process or once that's operating, if Electra were to cease to exist for whatever reason, and there could be many reasons that that happens, what position does that leave the township in with this project? Thank you.
Thanks. That's a great question. If Electra was needing to or wanting to sell off assets, they would probably, first of all, sell off to another company. If they did sell to another company for good or bad reasons, the other company would step into their shoes and be bound by all the contracts, okay, including our lease, our community benefits agreement, all the regulatory approvals and whatnot. So there could be a different future owner, and everything I told you about what's in those agreements and what will transpire and be in those agreements will hold. If Electra does not sell or transfer the project and Electra, let's say worst case scenario, is insolvent, it's almost inconceivable given that they're an LDC and they have their own rate base. But if they are insolvent, then typically what would happen would be a receiver would be put in to sell off their remaining assets, even if they were less than their liabilities. There'd be kind of a fire sale. The bank does that, secured creditors or the bank, secured lenders do that. And that process would just sell them off cheaper, less than what they're worth probably to someone else. And then again, that buyer, even through a receivership, would take all the contracts as they are, the lease, the community benefits agreement, they would have to uphold all those. They're not going to get renegotiated. In a scenario where they weren't even able to sell them off, even through receivership, and they're just stranded, let's say they do nothing, they're stranded, that is where the importance of the decommissioning security comes in. In a worst case scenario where nobody removes the batteries and the township has to do it themselves, you'll be happy you have the decommissioning security. The decommissioning security that we've drafted and proposed in the lease, right now, it's still draft, it's not signed right now, but the concept would be that they'd have to put up either a decommissioning bond or an irrevocable standby letter of credit from a major bank, or parent company guarantee from the mothership, or funds, like actual reserve funds, interest. All those things would make me happy and most, corporate lawyers happy, because we know what that means. The recourse means you don't need elector's permission for the township to be able to access that. We have proposed that the amount of that decommissioning security needs to be determined by what we call an IE, an independent engineering firm with expertise in decommissioning. They make a report with the decommissioning cost. Elector has to pay for the report. We get a copy, and that will be the cost. That will be the amount of decommissioning security that needs to be set aside. It's not for me to say. We don't know. We don't know. The township doesn't know. I don't know. So let's have experts figure that out. So that is what is proposed. That is better than what would be the case for pretty much any other industrial development out there.
Next. You, sir, and then you, sir.
Thank you. You didn't mention any of the environmental risk of this building, of what they're going to do with this. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yeah, thanks. That's also an excellent question. The technical and operational risk is something that Electra should speak to, because that is something that would, depend on compliance with manufacturers' recommendations, good industry practice, how they install it, operate, maintain it, all those things. So I'm just going to assume that they do all those things properly, and they can answer all the questions about what those things are. The legal part of that answer is they are liable under the lease if there is environmental contamination caused by them or the project or anyone that is hired or on that site because of Electra. So subcontractors, invitees, whatever, or anyone they sell it to, if they sell it to anyone else. So they would be liable to indemnify the township to the extent they cause or contribute to contamination, if there is any. We also keep an eye on minimum insurance that they carry in those contracts.
So, Brooke, this gentleman here was standing up.
Thank you very much. I'm David Arama. I'm an environmental scientist and climatologist. I've led over 10,000 teenagers on canoe trips, and I have a huge interest in our natural environment, wilderness, and the beauty of this region. So my big concern is with extreme weather and climate change and a sparse fire department and infrastructure. How in heck are we going to look after a potential forest fire disaster or any other event that could destroy that area for good? And those lithium batteries are super flammable. I hate lithium. So maybe you could answer my questions. Thank you. And go Blue Jays.
Yeah. And I think probably most of us in this room are environmentalists at heart, like we all, live in the country or spend as much time in the country as we can. I think most of those questions are questions for Electra and the fire safety plan. I will just answer one little slice of that from what I can do to help in that, with all of those things. A lot of those things are larger risks that are beyond the scope of this project in terms of forest fire risk and resources to manage a forest fire. And I know what happened here last weekend, and it's scary. Yeah. It's your decision. I'm just here to tell you, you have the advent of batteries and the insidiousness of batteries and where they're coming everywhere is coming, whether you approve this project or not. Because there's more batteries in vehicles, there's more batteries in like commuter vehicles, transportation vehicles, in homes, in businesses, in appliances, in yard tools, you don't even know where they are. People are buying them more and more all the time. And so the fire department will have to figure that out as best they can and be able to respond to those, just like they have to figure out wildfire response and how to keep up with resources needed. If I see an opportunity to negotiate some things that will help the township with those larger issues and costs and resources, that is my job to tell you there's an opportunity. And in this, in the CBA, what we're trying to accomplish is some training paid for by Electra to help the volunteer firefighters, fire chief, train up the fire department for readiness for this, and probably for other battery stuff as well. I'll let Electra comment on how much they're able to contribute to this, but some of these are larger issues. The project itself will have a fire safety plan, an emergency response plan, because that's required under other requirements in Ontario.
David, I apologize for not recognizing you last time we met in your nice restaurant. Okay, I'm going to let Electra answer some questions in a few minutes, but is there anybody else? Well, okay, this gentleman first. Please, so just as we go through, please state your name before you start.
Okay. Hi, I'm Carl Fleeler. I represent the owners of a property about 500 meters from the proposed site. My question is more towards the Environmental Task Force. And what I'd like to understand is what parameters and acceptance criteria were utilized to arrive at the proposed site. My understanding is that in January of this year, there were actually 3 sites that were being considered by Electra. So I'd just like to understand how they arrived at this particular site.
So the answer to your question is, to start with, is that township owns this site. It's right next to an active waste site, which has its own problems. It isn't right now, but it could down the road. And there's another one on the other side of the lake as well. So if you're going to site one within North Frontenac, this is a good place because we've got control over the first site. It became available, and as Lisa pointed out, if it's not here, it's going to be down the road. These transmission lines have a lot of capacity on them. So we're looking at this as a potential for us. But it's up to council as a whole, with your representatives, decide how we're going to go ahead, and your comments today will help us decide that.
Thank you. But just to elaborate, my concern is more about the location, not about the going forward with a BESS.
So overall, we have about 1,100 square meters of area, of which 71% belongs to the Crown. So you have all this property, but we don't really own it. We have some control over, but we really don't. We had this property and we turned it down. It could go to an adjacent landowner who wants to put one in. Okay, and if they did, we wouldn't get the lease portion or the rent portion, whatever else and so on. We might get the community benefit agreement. That would be it. So this is, if we're going to do one, this is the place. It's in the appropriate location if there is an appropriate location.
Okay, and those environmental aspects will be reviewed at a later date then by
There's a whole-
Mississippi Valley and the MOE.
All right, exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
We're not going into this blind, hopefully. Just trying to get on top of it. Next. So there's two or three people right here. The lady with her hand up, next, please.
Hi, my name is Lynn. And you had mentioned many times in the presentation, the requirement for supportive municipality. And I'm just wondering what that would mean if everybody here, 90% of the people in the Frontenac region, disagreed with it. Do we have the power to end this, or where does that lie?
The municipal support resolution would be decided by council.
Just to make sure that's an answer to the question then. So if we all disagreed and put our names on a list, does that hold any power or weight to the municipal's decision making?
I'll let the elected officials answer, but the elected officials are elected to decide how they vote on that. So it's their
But-
decision.
So they could vote, maybe the question's for you then. They could vote even though 90% of the people in this region would say no. Is that possible?
It is possible, but we've heard from some through a letter writing campaign. We've also heard from a number of people who are in favor of this. So, you know, it's not an issue where 99% of the people want or don't want it. It's kind of split. And it's a really difficult decision for council to make. You may not agree, you don't know, we don't know, but we get it from both sides saying, don't want it, I'm basing it on this petition, which you can decide for yourself whether it's reasonable or not. And on the other hand, here's people saying, this is a good project, the township needs it to move forward, because if we don't.
The
then-
township needs it for the money, but the rest of us, and I don't see a split from what I know, and I just found out about this 2 weeks ago. I did not even know this was
We've
existing.
been at this for like 4 months.
For sure, the onus, but we did not know.
Okay, so hang on. The last place you should go is social media for some of this stuff. But we've had it through council, and you can see that on YouTube and open councils. We had an open public forum, with questions and answers with Electra.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I don't mean to cut you off, but honestly, I had no idea, and many of my peers and people in this room had no idea. So maybe the onus is on us that we're supposed to look at news. I didn't know. And I'm not the only one who didn't know.
Okay. All right. Okay. Someone's calling my name. Okay. Larry?
Just a real quick one for Lisa. In the way that you described these agreements, then I'm assuming there's no assignment clause for Electra on this. They can't simply assign the contract.
Question. They can. They have assignment rights in the contracts. They all do. Contract for a project of this magnitude would be considered probably unfinanceable if it couldn't be assigned in Ontario, because they need to put it into a specific project company and then they could sell it in the future. We put in some extra language and conditions around that we recommend. Again, it's not signed yet, but we recommend, and they have our recommendation on that with some parameters on that it be an Electra affiliate, we'd like that, or it be like a credible, reputable counterparty, you know, another big major company that is reputable.
Because the concern with that obviously is what happened with windmills, right? Or the wind turbines in a lot of cases where they just assigned them to a shell company, pulled out the assets, and all this decommissioning stuff and everything everybody talked about was out was gone.
Yeah, that's not happening on my watch.
Okay.
It's a theoretical risk, but not something that, like, that's preventable through smart contract drafting and negotiation.
Thanks. Just a quick one for you, Mayor. From your comment, then, is it fair to say that, the township interest in this is basically to prevent it from going to some other location within the township versus the fact that there's actually a need for it?
If it's going in the township and it's sitting right next to an active waste site and we're getting all the benefits from it.
But that's what I'm asking.
Where it should go. If it's going on somebody's private property, that's nowhere near a waste site, or it's all by itself and we have less control over it and we get less money for it, that's a whole different ball of wax. I'll opt for the one where we have the most control.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, thanks.
You're trying to get points, you're not gonna get them. Suzanne Keating, sorry. I just want to follow up on the efforts to reach out to the community because I think I'm gonna follow up on the points by Lynn and discussions we've had is that lots of people don't know about it still. When we talk to them, they're still surprised, shocked. So I do believe even though you feel you've made adequate efforts, I think they have been inadequate. I would like to propose at the very least, you postpone this until the next year and try to reach out because clearly they would go ahead with an application next year anyway. So you could give us more time, give you more time to consult. Something this large, I don't think there was even in the council, I don't believe you even put anything in the Frontenac News little newspaper for us. I never saw it. We do have a mail out for our tax bills that wouldn't have cost you a penny more to add a little bit in there that would go to everyone who owns and pays taxes in this area. Would have been an easy and I think an appropriate course of action. So, I really think you need to consult further, more deeply, take some more proactive measures to make sure people hear. A lot of people who own property on waterfront are paying the majority of the taxes. And a lot of them are here part-time and they don't hear the news about the council meeting or this or that. You need to be proactive and get that information out there. That's my comment.
Okay, we're not deciding till next week. We had originally had this thought we would decide today, but we want an additional week of reflection based on some of these comments, and that's one we should pay attention to. So who's next? This gentleman right here.
Name is Russell Gray. I own the property between the dump. You have the property next to that, the Van Imp property. I own 600 acres. Keep hearing no residential, that is residential property. Says I can't build within a quarter of a mile of the dump. No building can go on there. Each lot, 100-acre lot is supposed to be a quarter of a mile wide. So I can still put a building up in there. What's that going to affect my building? Also, has anybody ever did an impact environmental study on that area? I know where there's 2 underground streams that run over there right into Cashewalk Lake off my property. Thank you.
On that, there's a whole series. This is just to say, can Electra bid? And if we agree and write this resolution or pass it, then they'll be able to bid. But after that comes all these different studies and they won't be cheap and that'll all be taken into account. And if they can't adhere to the requirements and pass the regulations and so on and meet the setbacks and everything, this will not go any further. We don't know that for sure. No, nothing, just the overall property.
I can add 2 comments for consideration on those points. I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that Electra might just bid next year. Okay, that's a totally different corporate decision that they have to make. It would not be a safe assumption for anyone in this room to think, they've asked for support now, for a bid now. I just want to put that out there. So there isn't anything on the table for a year from now. Council is being asked to decide now for an economic opportunity now. It's a lot of money. I can't say how much money it is, but it's a material amount of money. Many, many millions of dollars. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, so those are confidential. Yeah.
Okay. So
Oh, sorry. Okay, I don't want to comment on Salinas, and then on the point of whether the site has been narrowed down yet. when they option the 44 acres and they have to figure out what could make sense inside those 44 acres, that is not decided yet. That design work that they have to do depends on all the permitting, and it depends on them. They'll have to look at environmental stuff on the site, and there will be setback requirements coming from for a lot of reasons. There'll be noise setback requirements. There'll be Hydro One easement setback requirements. There will be, if there's water course or wetland or anything, they'll have setback requirements. So that's a difficult puzzle for any developer in any location, but the setbacks usually drive it somewhere on that site.
So we're going to switch to online for a while. Kelly, you want to take some questions? Or entertain some, please?
Yeah, so for anybody that is online, if you wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. Just to clarify, we will not be reading questions from chat. So if you do wish to ask your question, we do ask that you use the raise hand and we will allow you to speak. Once I've read your name, I will set the system to allow you to talk, and it'll just take a few seconds for the transition.
The other thing along with that is if we lose the connection, we're not going to go back and wait for you to reconnect. You can try again and put your hand back up again as we go along. Because the last time we did this, the online works, but sometimes you get an individual or two that has a poor connection and it just takes a long time and everybody was waiting around. So Kelly, can we go ahead, please?
Yeah, so the first person wishing to speak is Donald Morton.
Go ahead, Donald.
Good morning, everybody.
Can you speak up a little, Donald? You're a little hard to hear.
Oh, yeah, I can.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank Lisa for coming out today. That was a very good presentation. It was good to hear from you. I had a number of questions. I'll reduce them down to two, just to keep the. I see there's a lot of people there today, which is good to see. Lisa answered my question I had regarding the Indigenous partner. I was wondering, do we know who the Indigenous partner is? When will we know, and will the partnership be published publicly?
Electra should answer that. So why don't we queue that for the time when Electra, I think there's a few questions maybe in the queue for them to answer. My understanding is they're in discussions and negotiations now for.
Sure, I have a question for you, Lisa, and another question for the council. Okay, for you, Lisa, I'm just wondering, has there been any?
Don? It's
Yes.
just one, Donald, it's just one question now, and then we'll go back in the queue and bring you back up, back in again.
Okay,
Okay,
yep,
so-
I'll put my hand back
So the
up.
next person online, please.
So the next person online wishing to speak is Susan Hardy.
Good morning, Susan, welcome, or good afternoon, Susan, and welcome.
Good afternoon.
Sorry, Susan, I think I muted you accidentally.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Can you speak up a little? We can hear you, but it's kind of hard.
Sure. Thank you. I came in with one question, but actually listening to the audience, I just wonder, the key piece, what I'm hearing is around the constituents and time to be fully informed, to actually engage with a counselor. I tried to engage my counselor, was not successful. And I was quite robust in my engagement. I guess I wonder, date of October 31st, I wonder if at that time it could be considered to defer the consideration and request Electra wait until we have an election next year. Could it be part of the ballot system? And I'll just leave that with council.
So just on that, and not trying to be too catty with it, what would you do if only half the people voted? That's the problem is we can keep going and going and going, but at some point in time, we basically have to make a decision. And unfortunately, we've been at this for 4 months or more. There's been a lot of homework done. We've had the public meetings. Well, okay, if you're going to speak, it's going to be through a question and answer. So the point here is that we've done a lot of due diligence on this. This is not new. There's lots of opportunity. You may not like it, and I apologize for that. Council will consider whether or not we want to sign this or not, or whether we want to ask the lecturer to defer it. That will be done by next Friday. But at this point in time, this is what we're dealing with. Do we sign this agreement, or do we consider signing this agreement next Friday? We're looking for your comments. We've already heard that some of you are unhappy with the amount of time, but I'll tell you that when we were at the Clare Mail Hall, there was probably 50% more people than there is in this room. And we had maybe a third of what's here in the evening. And I received numerous letters. They've all gone on to our staff, and I believe our staff have sent a note saying thank you. Basically, we got it. Hopefully we got everybody, and we've read them. And we've heard from a number of you. So I mean, like, some point in time, when do we hit 97%? Hopefully we've got there. I don't know. Okay, so we're next online. Susan, did that answer?
Sorry, I removed her.
Okay, go to the next one, Kelly, please.
So the next one up is Margaret Sansom.
Good afternoon, Margaret.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me appropriately?
I think so.
Thank you. I am so lucky to have neighbors in Browns Bay who have kept me informed on this particular topic. And to those of you who don't know me, I just wanted to mention that I live right now 8 kilometers from the recent fires in the Palisades in Southern California. And to date, I still cannot swim in the Pacific Ocean. And I think the magnitude of that statement and the size of that body of water in comparison to the potential harm to my small bay, our small bay in Kashwakamak, should probably be apparent to all. No doubt you've performed a lot of due diligence, and I'm saying it's my responsibility to stay informed. But is there a way to synthesize this information, perhaps in a central place, not only where I can stay informed, but where I can share that link to others who may not be as informed as the community that's here right now?
Okay, so
And thank you.
sorry for cutting you off. 2 places. One, all these meetings are on YouTube. Secondly, we have a website called engagefrontenac.ca, and there's lots of questions and answers provided there for you. We too are concerned, trying to do the best we can for the community, so we appreciate your input. Do we have another individual online?
Mayor, Councillor Regent is also asking to speak.
Councillor Regent, at this point in time, we're not taking questions from councillors. Well, we had a closed meeting, folks, and that was the general gist. We had our opportunity to provide input. We want to hear from you. So sorry, councillor. The next person, she's a councillor. She's a councillor. So, okay. I'm not allowing any other council member to ask a question here. So this is what we're doing. Next person.
Okay, so the next person is Kathy P.
Good afternoon, Kathy.
Kathy, if you can just unmute yourself.
Can we go to the next one, Kelly, please?
Yeah, so if we can go to Michael Green.
Good afternoon, Michael.
There we go. I had to unmute people. Yeah, I was the author of the question there for Mr. Anders. I've been responsible over the years as a consultant for mine development properties.
Michael, can you speak up, please?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's a little difficult.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's just volume or what, but So I just wanted to know what kind of detailed risk analysis was done on this. If there was a feasibility study conducted, who prepared that? What consultant firm was contracted to do that work? I mean, I've heard lots of pro financial benefits, but I haven't heard the other side of the coin, which is the risk mitigation. And, forest fires, I've heard, shouldn't be included or not part of the scope, but typically in any kind of large development like this in the environment, you have to have a detailed risk analysis. And this would also include a forest fire mitigation plan and so on, and many others. I just wonder, is that available for public review if that feasibility exists, and we can make some comment on it?
So, Lisa, do you want to answer that?
Not for this particular project yet, but this may be a question that Electra should answer. I think all I can add right now is that every project, in my opinion, needs to be considered and scrutinized on the merits of the design. And so that becomes really important in the permitting process. I have a background as a regulatory permitting lawyer, and it really does depend on the project and the design and what's being proposed. So that more robust process has to happen then. I don't know if Electra wants to comment on, generally speaking, risk assessment for these types of projects.
Next one, Kelly, please.
The next one would be Nancy Rice.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Rice and a third-generation property owner on Kashwackamack, and I reside in the United States. If council does agree on this first step, as I understand it from the presentation, Electra has 3 years to be successful in getting a contract. And I was wondering if there could be some clarification as to what points in the process, assuming Electra does get a successful contract, where are there points in the process where the project does not go forward because the township's wishes? Are there any other stops along the process that the township can say, no, we don't want it now? Or is once the council agrees, assuming that they do, coming up in the next week or so, that it's the floodgates are open, and if Electra gets a contract, we got it?
So the potential exit ramps, if they get a contract, would all lie within the regulatory approvals processes. So the public would be involved in the process through the Conservation Authority, through the other ministries, and through the township's planning act review. Like anything, the township does not have a discretionary veto at large. It is within the framework of that authority that the township has at law under the Planning Act, and people would be able to participate in those public meetings. And it would have to be assessed on its merits at that point in time with those decisions.
Okay, I'm going to take two more online, and the second one's going to be Donald. So we have one more. Kelly?
We just have Donald is who's left
Okay.
at the moment.
Okay, Donald, you can go ahead if you're available.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Can you speak up a little? It would be better.
Yeah, it might be something on your end. I'm almost yelling in my microphone.
Sorry. Maybe it's
So,
my hearing.
the first question, yeah, it was for more Electra. This question is more for Lisa. I'm just wondering, in the Indigenous partners terms, in the contract there, do they hold veto power over decommissioning? Yes or no? And does the township keep the same say no power or veto power, so residents are not subordinate in their own township when it comes to decommissioning the project? I do have one comment real quick.
No, Donald, one
Okay,
question.
yep.
And that's actually a compound question, but they're tied together.
Yeah, I figured that was the last one, so it's okay.
Go ahead, Lisa.
The relationship with an Indigenous partner, if that shapes up, will be in an agreement between Electra and the Indigenous First Nation. They will have maybe an equity partnership agreement. That's what's been happening across Ontario and is highly regarded in many respects as an appropriate way for developers to interact with Indigenous communities. And it's proven it works. It's happening all over the place. So I think that's what they're working towards. We won't be a party to that. The township will not be a party to that. So it's between them, and it's probably, it's often equity. So they actually have shares in the project. And when they have shares in the project, they bring everything that they know and believe to that relationship as well. So those values kind of get layered in there as a part owner. You can imagine that band councils and organizations don't take that kind of relationship with the developer lightly. So that's why I say those values get layered into the relationship. What was the second part of the question? On decommissioning, I believe, and whether.
Yeah, it was just if they
Indigenous
hold
partner-
veto power over decommissioning the project. So if we want to decommission it in 20 years, can they step in and say no?
The lease term governs the term that they have a right to be there. So no, we can't have them leave or require they leave or take apart their project early. No, they have a lease term, just like any big lease. At the end of the lease, it says that Electra must decommission at their cost. And the decommissioning security is there in the background so that if they don't, we will. We being the township as the landowner.
Thank you. Kelly, is it just Donald that's left online?
No, Kathy, you would like to try again.
Okay, Donald, you had one question left, and then we'll take Kathy's, then we'll go back to the council chamber.
Okay, Lisa answered my question there. Just a
Thank you.
follow-up comment to what you were saying, Jerry. Myself, I have published 4 articles on this matter. Frontenac News has published an article after every single meeting with Bess. Engage Frontenac has all the information, and I commend council's efforts actually for posting so much information and being so transparent. It's actually refreshing from a media standpoint. I encourage our community, my community, to look for this information. It's all out there, and I encourage everybody to read it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And by the way, folks, it's not just for this project. All major projects are on Engage Frontenac. And if you want to know what's happening in the other townships, it's on there as well. So let's go to the last individual online, and we'll revert back to the council chambers.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Welcome, Kathy. Like getting stood up for a date, right? Okay. I'm going to go back to the council chambers now. I'm going to entertain another 4 or 5 questions, and then we're going to flip over and let Electra do some time. Mike had his hand up first.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Mayor. Question to council, and I don't know who of you would answer, Mayor. I understand RFPs, I understand tenders, I understand proprietary information. In your opinion, do you believe that the financial benefits that's coming to the township is enough to mitigate all the environmental and fire and risks and worries that the citizens, the businesses, all of the owners, will this outweigh that, in your opinion?
Thanks for the question, Mike. Look, it's an excellent question. It really is, because the financial benefits could be getting in the way. But we're a very small township, and we need to grow. And we need to bring in younger people, and we need to put ourselves on the map. We're already punching well above our weight, and we're doing great. but what happens down the road? So we have to take all this into account and be really serious about it. This is not something we could just go like that and it's done. So when if Electra gets this contract, they're going to have to go through a whole series of tests, studies and so on to prove that that site is a viable site. Okay? If those studies come back and say yes, or okay, but you need to do X, Y, and Z, they will have to do X, Y, and Z to make that a viable site. But meanwhile, we're sitting with a landfill site right there, and we have monitoring wells around it, and we're not seeing any migration. But we also have a concern that if the migration would start and it goes this way into Electra's property, but that's actually max 2. It's in the agreement. So I'm going to say right now, for the benefit of the township, I believe it is. That doesn't say I'm voting for this or not, but it is a viable, well, you've got to go through the whole shebang, folks. There are so many opinions on this, and we hear them all or hear the most of them. We have to keep an open mind, and it's not always easy, but we're trying to do our best for you and for us. We all live here. So does that answer the question? Sorry. Okay, there was, yes, sir, and then you, yes. Sorry for pointing, but.
Hi, my name is Doug Hallman. I'm a representative from Frontenac Shores and a long-term tourist here in North Frontenac. We started coming to the lake back in 1958. There's been five generations of us at the lake. One of the things that we enjoy most about the lake is the quietness of the lake. And I do want to thank Kevin for actually engaging with me on this topic. The question I have specifically deals with decibel levels of noise pollution that those on the lake are going to hear. And is there a way, typically when all of the acoustic studies are done on these projects, they take and they look at a sound level that is, what is the sound level maximum in the area? In this case, according to Kevin, that comes down to a provincial code which says 40 dB during the day, or 40 dB during the night, and about 45 during the day. Unfortunately, we live in a community that is a lot quieter than that, which means even if they are able to take and meet those mitigation risks in general, our area is quieter. I don't have an acoustical measurement microphone that is calibrated in my back pocket to test. But my cell phone was able to pick up about 25 dB at night this morning and last night as well. It was kind of like an average in the area. Is there a way in our agreement with Electra to require that study to study down to lower sound levels so that we can truly understand how far the sound would spread?
This is a great question. I'm a quiet lake person too. I would have the exact same question if I were you. I think Electra should answer this first, and then I will weigh in on their answer, because it is so site specific. But I do just want to clarify, like, the limits they will be faced with are limits. Okay, they're limits. They're not about creating an ambient, like they have to be below their limits. I've done a lot of development across Canada before, and there are limits that make or break locations for projects. And limits usually dictate that things may have to go further away, or there needs to be attenuation buffer. Usually they just need to go further away. Everyone's really sensitive to the limits on this. The one really nice thing about this project, and why it, like when I looked at it, I became a little more comfortable with that question, was there's so much trees in between. So I think Electra needs to, well,
Thanks, Mike.
yeah. When, like, the site has not been, like, the project has not been located yet, right, on that site?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
That's right. So that's why, like, all of this matters. I think Electra should answer first, but they are going to be subject to regulatory limits to determine what's possible.
Well, and I totally understand that. The question is more, can we as North Frontenac force them to go farther on their studies to investigate, say, how far that sound would go at 25 decibels, or what would be, not audible with a tonality at 120 hertz coming off the transmitter, or when they're doing the transmission. That would probably be, somewhere around 16 to 18 decibels that we'd be able to hear, even with background noise being at 25 decibels. So the question is not that, are we going to stay within the law? But the question is, from the township side, how far will this actually go so we can truly protect the residents and protect the tourism on those two lakes?
I don't think I should answer that right now because I want to be really careful, to be honest with you. So I don't think I should answer it right now. I think Electra should answer it. Like there's just modeling required as well. I don't know if you want Electra to answer now or just to wait.
No, I'm going to take 2 more questions and then, no, hang on, I've already got people. Okay, I'll let you be one of them, but first of all, I want to talk to this lady right here. Okay. Right beside, right in front of you, Brooke.
Good afternoon. My name is Tammy Mepstead, and I'm a resident here in Plevna. I love this community, and I hear both perspectives here. I have one question, I think, for Lisa. As the owner of the land, is there any additional responsibilities that we are signing up for as part of the option agreement or the draft lease that you've got in process?
There are typical covenants in it that any landowner would have in an option agreement or in a lease when leasing land to a project like this. So they're all typical and predictable. Like they'll have exclusive rights to their exclusive footprint once it's narrowed down. So the idea is the township wouldn't be allowed on there, as you would expect. It'll be fenced, it'll be locked, and they have insurance and safety requirements to keep it fenced and locked. So the general idea of this lease is that they will have an exclusive area. They'll have to build and pay for a road and keep it secure and whatnot. The township doesn't really have any performance covenants once that happens, other than to stay off of it. Really is really the main thing. The township plays a passive landlord role in just collecting the rent. The big thing that we focus on and negotiate are those environmental indemnities respectively. So, if one or the other causes contamination on the site, they indemnify the other. That's an objectively fair concept. It's the right concept at law. My advice to landowners is always don't go on the site and don't do anything. So then that's the best approach. And just leave that area to Electra. Remember here, it's not the whole legal parcel. They'll end up having a small spot on that whole legal parcel in the end. And all of these comments, if this advances, would drive where that goes, right? So.
Right. So there was one lady in the back who said we didn't, I couldn't see you, I apologize. And that's going to be our last comment. Hang on, folks. You have a council in front of you. We have rules. I know.
Yeah.
They're here.
Okay, go.
I wanted to talk about I guess the CBA, what was called the CBA. We heard all of the positives, and I really appreciate having a lawyer in a room that works on our behalf, but nevertheless, from council and lawyer, I've heard zero negatives. This must be like a godsend project that has absolutely zero negatives. It feels a little one-sided on one hand. So speaking about the CBA, and we are all landowners here. And by the way, I'm sorry, my name is Joanna Murray. And I do understand that the council is concerned about the growth of the community. And I want to talk about that as it relates to the CBA and the impact on the community. I want to know how this impact would be assessed. I've been coming here for about 14 years, something like that. I've lived here for 3 years. And now I live in another rural community not far from here. And over the year, my family, my friends from all over Canada, literally from Alberta, love coming here. Every time my relatives from Alberta come to Ontario, they spend a week or two in Frontenac. So, and the reason why they come is from, you know, we all know the lake, the clean air, particularly the dark skies reserve and so on. So all of this will be gone as far as we understand, including the water. But in terms of how so all of these people that come actually contribute a lot to our businesses. I know a lot of people here that have actually helped me work on our cottage or deliver dirt and so on and so forth. There's so many services that we actually all use. All of the people that come here and use the resorts, and for example, all of those people that go to the resorts, they also use the businesses in the town. They will not be coming here with a project like this. I live very close to the dump. Actually, none of the people that actually come here, I used to be a teacher. My students came here like in drones with their families, and they actually still do. These provide actually economic development. They contribute to economic development. They would not be coming. And therefore, if that happens, I would not need to have anybody snowplow. I would not be shopping at the grocery store, home improvement. And it's the same with the resort. So I want to know how a resort like Mike's, for example, will be compensated for the loss. Like what kind of study should he do in order to know what what compensation he's entitled to? Me, because I'm very close to the dump, and I know that I used fracking to actually open my water well. So the granite rock has been fractured, and it has been for many other people in this area. So the gentleman before talked about the water sources underneath the dump. And this will be, I mean, a site like this kind of project with lithium batteries, by the way, lithium batteries, there are other projects. There are other types of batteries coming on. These will be polluting our waterway.
End your comment very shortly because you're well over the time. So I guess.
Yes. So my question is, do I have to have an environmental study and prove that my water is not contaminated right now? And should the business owners actually have to do their study so we can prove afterwards? Because I suppose it's going to be on us. The financial honors would be on us to prove that we actually lost anything. So can I actually get my cottage evaluated today at the present, for example, that's the question for the lawyer, at the present value, because in 5 years I'll be told, well, it's not really worth very much. But would we all be compensated for, because if I don't have a water well, I don't have a cottage. I have nothing basically. So how would that compensation actually work? What for the businesses in Frontenac and for the people that own the land? Thank you.
Hard because it's not just a legal question, but I'll just comment. Maybe it would be helpful for, again, I'm not the project proponent, but I do see how many of these questions here today are about the project itself and the impact of the project itself. And I went through all the comments that have been sent in advance, and I see a lot of them are about the water. For sure, I would have the same questions if I was nearby. I think the proponent needs to explain that better. I can sit here and tell you I'm satisfied, but you have to be satisfied yourself, and you have to understand what is being installed on the site, what the base below it is, what kind of foundation it's going on, what it looks like, what the containment is, what those units actually are. I think people need to understand that so we know what we're talking about here, because there are a lot of like abstract ideas of what this might be, but that's not actually what it is. So I do think Electra should answer this question more so than me. On the legal aspect of that, This is part of like a bigger law and policy issue, and I can only say to orient everyone that any given site, any given piece of property, no matter who it's owned by in our society, they can do what is allowed by law on their site. So it takes you back to land use planning laws. You know, what's in the official plan of your township, what's in the zoning of your township for where certain things should go. And then if it's within the zoning, what is going to get approved by a site plan on any given site. And there are comments that get to feed into all of that if people believe that something is proposed on a site that needs to be addressed in that site plan approval process. Like, and those are kind of core concepts of land use planning, and they would be the same whether a factory was proposed, whether a subdivision was proposed, whether a avatar was proposed. Isn't the location needs to be assessed on the land use planning values. And so the question isn't really one of compensation for everyone around from that. That's not how land use planning works. It's about the appropriate use and the approved use under land use planning processes. So everyone, you know, can and should participate in that if that goes to that stage. If there was direct damage from one property to another, if I contaminate your land, heaven forbid, you would have a claim against me. That's also a general legal concept. The claim wouldn't be against the municipality. The claim would be against me, the person that contaminated, just like that would happen if Electra was your neighbor. So those are just general concepts. Again, I'm not here to give any one landowner legal advice, but just to help orient people in how to think about all of this.
I mean, do we have to? So that means that the owner would have to go through a study, legally speaking, for a lawyer. So I would have to go through a study to prove that the contamination is owned to this company and this site, right? Normally, that's what it entails.
That's not what I just said. So
That's what I'm
yeah.
asking. So you could just say yes or no, or.
Well, if you
elab-
had contamination caused by Electra, your claim would not be against the municipality. It would be against Electra.
I do understand that. I never mentioned the municipality. I'm sorry. I just said, so so I would have to take on Electra financially. So prove that I'd have to have probably scientific proof that it comes from the site, and then I would sue Electra, I suppose.
Yeah, but yes,
Right.
and that is what happens if people experience contamination is they hire an environmental consulting firm to assess it. So that is what would happen. The community benefit agreement is money that would come to the township if this proceeds, significant amount for the betterment of the community on whole, for programs and services and infrastructure in the community.
Or a ghost town. Thank you.
So we've had a lot of questions, and the answers are we have to talk to Electra. So Electra is online. I'd like them to weigh in and answer some of the questions. Okay. Go ahead. Who am I talking to here? Which one? This gentleman here? Okay. Hang on, I'm gonna bring the mic to you. And then the floor is getting turned over to Electra.
Okay, Suzanne Keating again. And I guess first I'm gonna slip in a comment in that it doesn't give us comfort that you're gonna slip a high risk project by the dump because it's already a risky area. So just compounding the problem for those of us who live in the vicinity, but that's not really my question. So my question is, we have a secure decommissioning pot of money, is my understanding. And what about a secured environmental mitigation fund? Is that something that could be negotiated so that we would also have a secured pot of money that should there be some kind of contamination, that the township could access that to mitigate those issues? And what kind of water program and monitoring will you put in place for us? Because these contaminations are not visible through our regular water testing that we send in to Kingston. They're invisible to us. We won't know they're there. People won't know if it occurs until they're sick. And that could be long after the company's gone. So what kind of monitoring process will be there? What kind of water program will the township guarantee to us if we cannot drink our water? That's right. Lake water too, because people access a lot of their drinking water from the lake. Thank you.
Can I have a quick question?
And then we're going to Electra.
Yeah. Right now, there's no separate environmental reserve fund separate from the decommissioning financial security. That is not in the contracts. I am not aware of that in any battery energy storage system contract I'm just not aware of any in Ontario. So I just want to be honest with you. Because if there was contamination, people would have a claim against Electra if they caused it. That's just a legal truism. And Electra is a big company, and Electra also has insurance. So remember that too. Okay, so it's not that there's no recourse. There is recourse. There's recourse against a significant company, and there's also insurance if there was an insurable event. So no one should think there's no recourse. But your question of whether there's an environmental reserve fund set aside right now, there is not. Could we ask or negotiate for one? I don't know, because it's not, I'm not saying it's a good or bad idea, I'm just saying it's off market, so it's hard for me to negotiate something that's off market. All I could do is ask and predict what the answer would be. I think that's all I can say about that right now, is that if there was contamination, there would be a claim and there would be recourse that way. And Electra is a credit-worthy company too. If it, again, this goes back to, if it wasn't a credit-worthy company, if it was a brand new company we'd never heard of before, and that has happened around this area, then we wouldn't be having the same conversation. I think we should turn it over to Electric for a little bit to talk about like what the project actually is and the design requirements of it, because some of these are relevant to some of these questions, and the regulatory requirements that pertain to that design.
They're going to do that. Part of the answer though is if you're on Kashwackamack Lake, we have landfill sites on either side. One on the south, one on the north. And we have waste sites, one on the north and one on the south side. And we have monitoring wells that we constantly check to make sure that there is no additional effluent or contamination leaving the waste site. And if we would note that, then we would move in and mitigate whatever that's required. We're well aware of the problem, the potential problem. In fact, at the end of the day, and this is only my opinion, we don't really know what's in this landfill. Well, you honestly don't. Someone takes a clear bag and sticks something in the middle of it, inside a colored one or something else. You really know what's in there? Because I don't. So, and at least we would have a reasonable idea what will come out of an Electra site should there be a failure. And that's just my opinion. So I'm going to turn it over to Electra, and then we'll see where we go from there. Electra's got to have time. That's because if there's a possibility of something happening, that's why. If I put it next, the testing comes after they get the okay to go ahead, because the testing is going.
I just, ladies, I'm sorry, no one can hear you online without the microphone. Ma'am, they can't.
What about the future generations? You want to take care of the township. What about our future families? If the lake is contaminated, our wells are contaminated.
I live downstream from Cashwackamak Lake.
Well, I live on Cash too.
So whoever starts there is coming right downstream.
And there's one incident, it took 2 years for people to be informed they were drinking contaminated water in Carlton Place. Does that make us feel good?
No, I don't have an answer for some of that, or we don't have it. We're doing the best we can for you. Well, compared to any place else in the township, it probably is. So. And well, okay. All right, so let's put Electra online. We want to hear from Electra now. Okay,
Sure, I
folks.
can start if that's all right.
Just a minute, guys. Folks, it's only fair. Everybody's had a say, or most of you had a say. Well, hang on. It's time to let Electra have their say and answer some of the questions that you have raised and you look for answers for. So let's be fair and courteous until. I think we'll allow that to happen. Okay, Electra, you're on board. Introduce yourselves and go forward.
Thanks, and I can't hear everything that's going on in the room there, so but let me know if you can hear me. My name is David Anders. I'm the Director of Distributed Energy Solutions with Electra Energy Solutions. So appreciate everybody who's come out today. See, there's a really good attendance and a lot of questions, and I hope to be able to get to as many of these as we can in the short time that we've got available. But first of all, am I coming through okay? Can everyone hear me?
Fine.
Okay. So I'll try to take these a little bit in the order. But a number of different themes. I think the one we sort of started with and the one that was left off there is really on the environmental impacts. And I think I just want to reiterate the good point that was made, Mr. Mayor, that there's a lot of concern about the water and understand how important that is. But really, what we're talking about here is a facility that does not have any emissions. We are not contaminating the water in any way, and if there was contamination, as you pointed out, the waste site right next door to it has a much bigger potential for contamination, and as a result, does require a lot of extensive monitoring. So, we can sort of worry, I guess, about all these hypotheticals, but I think we really have to understand exactly what the nature of the technology is, the nature of the environmental risks. So to that point, the Ministry of Environment does lay down the regulations around assessing environmental impacts for, every sort of range of project under the sun. Specifically, when they look at projects like this, because there really isn't any emissions, the major items that they're concerned with are things like noise. There will be a noise study done, and I'll talk a little bit more about that and the points that Doug brought up. In addition to that, there will be environmental assessments done on site. We've already done a level 1 screening, but there'll be further environmental assessments just to understand, is there any sensitive habitat, waterways, things like that. If there are, based on those environmental guidelines, then that would restrict what sort of area we can develop in. And this is not unique to batteries, but this would be any sort of development that would have restrictions from encroaching on any sensitive environmental areas. And then in addition, of course, there is the municipal planning process that would look for things like surface water and runoff and make sure that we're mitigating any impacts that direction. So that's just to really kind of encapsulate, I think, that the main environmental impacts that we're talking about. I think fire safety and things like that is another whole topic, and there's a question on that, and I'll talk about that. But we just want to put that in a little bit into perspective in terms of the level of impact that can be expected here. There really is no way that the project itself or the content of the project is going to contaminate the lake, for example, in a meaningful way. Next thing I wanted to touch on, the topic that was brought up around fire safety and risk analysis, and understand, the concerns are very real with respect to forest fires and the impacts of climate change. I've seen it where I'm as well. I think the whole world is seeing that. The reality is that those risks are there, regardless. One thing I think that we're hoping that this project will bring to the community is more resources to be able to deal with these mounting risks that are climate change driven around forest fires. And, to also point out that the majority of forest fires are human caused. There's a myriad of different causes. Any sort of land use by humans, whether it's recreational or for commercial reasons, could have a higher impact in terms of the risk of fire. In our case, there's a lot of different aspects that we're going to be looking at in terms of mitigating any in fire safety and helping the community prepare for any potential impacts of fire. Posted online is our presentation that was made during the public meeting, and there's a lot of content there specifically on fire safety when it comes to batteries. So I don't want to go into all that detail here, but suffice to say, we see this as one of the major items that we are concerned with as a developer and as an owner. We look to the best-in-class technologies with the most proven fire safety records. There are now standards that are requiring these systems to be tested in a full-scale, forced situation where there's a fire to see how they operate. And the facilities are designed in order to contain sort of that worst case event and make sure that doesn't spread. In addition, we would be doing a hazard mitigation analysis and fire safety plan associated with the site. And essentially, we believe that the site will be better protected, as a result of our work there, than it currently is from a perspective of forest fires. Just going down some of the topics that were addressed. Maybe just kind of related to that topic, there's questions about the feasibility studies that have been done and will be done. So I just wanted to mention that, because of the nature of the way these projects come together, we're not able to do sort of a full preliminary design and full feasibility study on all aspects before we bid. We're able to do a certain amount of due diligence, and then there's a process that will happen after the bid. So we have done an initial critical issues assessment. This was done by a third party, Stantec, primarily looking at sensitive environmental areas on the site and that sort of thing. There will be further environmental studies, as well as the typical studies that would be done, like cultural heritage impact assessments in the development process. And then there will also be a third party hazard mitigation assessment done specifically around fire, but really any safety risks associated with the site. There's a third party that we engage and we have engaged on our previous projects, Fire and Risk Alliance. They're pretty much the leading firm that does this type of study for battery facilities. And so that is something that we would do as part of our downstream development process, have a third party report prepared by them, and that would inform the plan that we would put in place with the fire department. And of course, the fire department would be one of the agencies commenting on our site plan approvals. So any municipal approvals we have going forward would have to satisfy the fire department, as well as a number of other stakeholders around the safety and security of the site and those hazards. There's a question on Indigenous partners. So as mentioned, right now we're in discussions with an Indigenous partner. We have in some previous projects that were submitted in the energy part of this procurement elsewhere in the province, partnered with the Algonquins of Ontario, and so we're in discussions with them on this as well. They represent a number of different Algonquins First Nations communities, and is our understanding that this project where it's situated is within the traditional claimed territory of the Algonquins. Understand there's a number of different First Nations communities, and some of them may be members of the AOO and some not. the Algonquins of Ontario have, really that we see them as having a good representation of a broad number of communities, and they have the resources and experience to be an equity partner on this. So that's currently where we're at in terms of negotiating the Indigenous community partner. Maybe the last one that I will address on the noise, and specifically Doug's questions there. So we have to sort of plan and sort of certify our site to any provincial requirements as well as municipal requirements if there are any. Now, that being said, I think the concerns that Doug brought up and in some of the material I think that were forwarded to us, there's a very big difference between looking at how noise propagates in a perfect sort of open area versus on a site like ours, which is hilly, is heavily forested. So what we've typically seen in our other projects, and I'll bring some examples forward. We're building 3 projects right now in Vaughan and Guelph, and we have done those noise studies. We're seeing those regulatory limits of 40 to 45 decibels, within 100 meters from the project site. So what we have to do in our noise study is show that at any nearest receptors, and usually that's say a neighboring property line, that we're below that level. What this means, though, in practice is that noise is going to continue to get absorbed and dissipated by the surrounding trees in the area, the terrain. We expect that noise to fall off quite dramatically after that. So if you think about where the site is located, it's next to a roadway there. It's next to a waste site. The types of noise we're talking about is really the HVAC units that are cooling the batteries. This is something akin to your typical air conditioning system. So wherever you are, if you can't hear a noise of vehicles at the dump, for example, then very unlikely you're going to hear anything from the battery site next door to it. That's just kind of to get an idea. But we do think that, noise based on where the site is not going to impact even the closest neighbors. That was sort of the main points that I jotted down that I thought I wanted to address, but happy if there's anything that I haven't addressed to follow up on any of that.
Okay, we're going to, if you're up for it, would you accept questions from the audience? Are you good with that? Okay, all right. So anyone who wants to put your hand up, sorry.
I'm just going to remind everybody, if we don't speak into the microphone, the people who are attending online can't hear you. It's just silent. Yeah. So just a little reminder.
Okay, so we're going to allow individuals who have questions for election to put those forward. And so same rules, 1 question each, whatever. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm just downhill from the dump site. We're a resort and we're already not very far from the power lines, which are clear cut. And from what I understand, you're going to possibly clear cut 10 acres minimum to possibly 40 acres right beside a dump on a plateau between 2 major lakes. We're downhill, Cache is downhill, we're Mississauga. We can hear vehicles from the road because of the hydro lines, and this is going to exacerbate that. Knowing this, I find it hard to comprehend that you're comfortable with environmental assessments coming through saying, hey, yeah, that's okay. Because again, we're downhill, 2 lakes on a plateau, fractured rock, clear cutting land. I mean, even clear cutting the land from the dump might cause some issue. Runoff from rain, etc., coming downhill to our lakes.
Electric, you care to respond to that? Please?
Yeah, when it comes to site runoff, I mean, that is one of the major items that is looked at in the planning process. So typically we do have to do a surface water study. We have to make sure that, you know, we are, because of our activities on site, we are not affecting surface water drainage more than the existing flows. So they would basically look at how water flows on the existing site, and anything we do that disrupts that, we would have to mitigate by adding additional, say, drainage or retention ponds, things like that. This is something we do on every site we would do. So, you know, the changes are not, they're no different here than any other site. With regards to the area, you know, I just do want to clarify, you know, 10 acres is sort of the maximum extent that we'd be looking at. We think, you know, in all likelihood, we'll take up less than that. So I'm not sure where the 40 acres came from, but, you know, obviously we need distance to be set back from the hydro lines, set back from waterways, things like that. That means those areas we're not going to be clearing. Those areas are going to be staying as is, you know, maybe subject to things like access roads. But, you know, 10 acres is sort of the extent of what would be cleared. And if you're looking at, you know, the hydro corridor there, you know, our overall site is probably not going to be much more than, actually, it's going to be a lot less than the total width of the existing hydro corridor. And obviously that runs for hundreds of kilometers. So, you know, in terms of the overall area that's, you know, being deforested, it's very, very minimal compared to what is essentially adjacent to the site.
Anyone else?
We do have a hand up online.
Okay, I'll get you online in a second. I've got two questions here in the council chambers. This lady first. This is for Electra.
Okay, it's just, you're talking phase one. How do we know it's not going on to phase two? Maybe it might even go into phase three. I mean, what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah. So I can respond quickly. So right now we are limited to, in terms of what we present to the IESO, has to be based on what we've presented here to the council and to the community, and what we've outlined in our you know, our pre-engagement communications with the community here. We can't propose something, then turn around and submit something else to the IESO. We can't participate in any future procurements without going through the same type of process on a different project. So what we're talking about here is the full extent of what we're looking to develop. There is no future phase of this.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question.
I can translate that into a direct legal answer too, if you want. They can't expand without coming back to the community. So whatever size project, if they were to get a contract, whatever it would be now would be what it is. If they want to bolt onto that and make it bigger in the future, they have to come back and it's all over again. Like, so it'll be a known size.
So who else had the hand up? You did. Okay.
Suzanne again. Is there another site that you could use that is not wedged in between the two lakes? I mean, I think a huge concern for people is a huge concern, obviously, is the fact that this site is being proposed right between two lakes and very close to the two lakes with fractured, you know, rock underneath. And, you know, we just don't want it there. And I think people would be much more open to a spot that was isolated from the lakes. There's a lot of land. Even if the money didn't come to the township, I think people would rather see it go somewhere where it wasn't wedged between these two lakes. And is there another site that the township could offer up? for that.
No, so that's a good question. We, as a township, some local governments have a large land bank. We do not. So this is really the only one we have of any regular capacity, reasonable capacity. We would have to buy land off another landowner in order to allow a site like this within the township borders. Well, if we would pay for it, okay, just like if you wanted to buy a lot, put a house on and so on, you didn't like the lot you had, you buy another one, we could do that. But then this opportunity, if we choose to do that, would pass us by, most likely, but not necessarily. Could go to a regular landowner, and if it does, as before, possibly, but we would face the very same issues there. So let's just look at this reasonably. Hang on, look at it this way. We have a known site. Yes, we have to do a lot of testing to prove that the site is viable for this. Seems to be reasonably situated, but if we went to a private landowner, they would have to go through the very same requirements for that site as they would for this site. It's going to face the same opposition, and we would not get any of the financial benefits other than the basic taxes and maybe the community, the community fund at the end. So hang on, Rob, sorry, Rob.
Oh, okay. Robert Lesperance, but I'm pretty sure everybody knows me for some reason or another in this room. I'm the author of the petition in opposition of this. The key 5 components were the environmental impacts on our waterways, the risk to private well water and local water supplies, fire and toxic hazards, financial and liability risks, and community and infrastructure disruptions. So the request in my petition was, given the significant environmental, health, safety, and financial risks, we would respectfully call upon the North Frontenac Council to say no to the electric site proposed today. Reason being is we would like them to seek alternative or more suitable locations like it's been touched on here. And, areas that are more suitable for any of the potentials. We can say all day long and used car sales pitch it all day long and how it's a great idea. Accidents happen, things happen. Built by the lowest bidder sometimes has its setbacks. But I'm asking for our council that, we always want to believe has our best interests at heart to prioritize our health, our environment, our long-term well-being, and not just short-term 20-year financial gains. There's 512 people on this petition so far, and it's growing, that do not share the positive sentiment that is coming from this side of the table.
Kelly, is there anyone online wanting to ask?
We do have 3 online. We can start with Michael Green.
Welcome, Michael.
Hello, can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Yeah, just I just want to follow up some of the posted questions I have there. Especially when it comes to feasibility studies. I'm a former project manager for Stantec, and I know there's a lot of details that go into these studies, and you would never have any financial investment without a good ROR on that investment. And I'm wondering if any of these studies that have been done and conducted to date are available for peer review, and even myself, I would volunteer my services to assist the community.
So this is an election question?
Yeah. So like I said, the studies that have been done have been limited to sort of an initial critical issues analysis, highlighting, sensitive environmental areas, waterways, things like that. We have not done more detailed feasibility studies, the hazard mitigation analysis that I mentioned. So nothing right now is public. Going forward with the project, some of this may become public. Have to look into it more, I think, with the municipality as well in terms of what would be published and what wouldn't. I think things like hazard mitigation analysis, decommissioning plans, things like that are things I've seen publicly posted in other jurisdictions when it comes to these projects. But details of feasibility, technical feasibility, financial feasibility, typically not going to be published.
Second person online, Kelly.
The next person wishing to speak is Donald Morton.
Welcome back, Donald.
Thank you again. This project is this question is for Electra. Other projects that one specifically is posted on the Engage Frontenac site. I think it said it's, forgive me, I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me either. They're within 10 meters of their BESS. I think it's a college. They've reported their noise pollution down to about 20 decibels. Can you confirm that the noise mitigation can and will match the current environment decibel? I think the audience member there said it's about 25 decibels on his iPhone.
I guess all I can really say at this point is that, we'll be compelled to meet the provincial requirements as well as anything the municipality has in terms of meeting bylaws. We have to have a target to shoot for. If anything is required in terms of mitigation, and that could take a number of different forms, barriers, extra, berms, things like that. Then that's certainly something we would look at if it was necessary. But we'd really look to the noise study to identify what the requirements were and what needs to be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online? Kelly?
I have one more at the moment, and it's Steve Williams.
Welcome, Steve.
Hi, guys. Yes, I just wanted to ask Electra, do you have any examples of where you've had an accident or pollution of the waterways that you could show us where you cleaned it up properly and how it had a positive effect versus a negative effect on the residents?
Yeah, short answer is no. We don't have examples of where we have had incidents related to batteries, or I guess environmental cleanup, results. These are new technologies, but also the incidences of these things happening are very, very low. And like I said, contamination from emissions, there really is no emissions. So I don't know of any other examples where a lithium-ion battery system from operational reasons has contaminated a waterway.
Okay, thank you. So in the council chamber.
So if there was an accident or a forest fire, your site contaminated, you've never incurred that at any of your other sites across Canada?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so. Can you please?
I can give it just a couple data points here for thoughts. I attended an expert panel in Toronto 2 weeks ago on this exact topic, leading experts across the country, fire safety folks in the battery world that have been studying and monitoring this in the US mostly, and a little bit in Canada over the last few years with the advent of utility scale batteries. These are just thoughts for the mix for everybody thinking about this. One of the gentlemen on the panel said there were over 12,000 industrial site fires in the US last year. 6 were from batteries. And 4 were from one company that did something bad. Okay, so they were kind of like an outlier, one company. So their point, and again, I'm not here to tell anyone what to do, but I'm just giving some perspective compared to most other industries, statistically, they're just a lot safer than most other industries when you assess that kind of risk. Another thing that I thought would be worthwhile for Electra to explain to everyone here is exactly what these containers are and what they sit on. I told you I would be worried about water too if I was a person, but I know what they look like, and I think everybody here should understand what they look like because they actually are contained. Unlike some other kinds of development out there that actually does contaminate the environment, these are very contained and they're on a foundation. I think Electra should provide more detail to that to explain to people so people can formulate their opinions.
Can you do that, fellas, please?
Yeah, maybe I don't know if I can share my screen at all or not, but,
Yeah, you can. Just give me 1 minute.
okay. I guess when we talk about what these things are going to look like, and I'll show you a sort of a representation of that when I can share my screen. We're talking about outdoor rated sort of metal enclosure, similar to any sort of utility gear. Inside that, you're going to have a number of a system of racks. The racks contain modules, and the modules contain the individual battery cells. We're talking about, in the terms of the battery cells, this is not much different than what is in your cell phone, your power tools. Those are the actual lithium-ion battery cells, and those are arranged. Those are obviously sealed themselves. They're arranged into a series of modules, which are in most cases sealed against any sort of moisture. These are waterproof. And then inside the enclosure, and the enclosure itself sits on a concrete slab. So we're talking about the substances in the batteries themselves. Even in the event of a failure or a fire, there really isn't much that can leak or contaminate the environment. If we're talking about the site being inundated with water for firefighting, which is something that is not recommended generally for batteries, then we're talking about runoff, and we're talking about any sort of runoff from the site, which would have obviously different concerns. Even with the waste site next door, there'd be concerns around runoff. And if I can share my screen here, I will just show something here. If you can see my screen, I mean, this is a representation. The exact technology and vendor we have not selected yet, but this is representative of the type of installation that you would see. So inside the larger metal enclosure, you can see the racks with the modules, and inside the modules would be those individual cells. There's a lot that I could talk about in terms of the safety systems that are built in, how they're monitored, how they're controlled to make sure that these failures don't happen. But really that's kind of what we're talking about. So most of us walk around with one of these batteries in our pocket, all the time. We don't these days, I don't think give it much of a second thought. Understand when technologies are new, there's a lot of concern around it, but it's in many cases it's something that we've already learned to live with pretty intimately in other forms, and this is just a different form of a similar technology. Hopefully that answers the question.
I do also know that there are a lot of these installed everywhere around Ontario right now. People just don't know about them because there hasn't been a public procurement. They've been being installed for well over a decade because I've been involved in the contracts with them. Basically a lot of factories, certainly any big factories, hospitals, colleges, universities, institutions, they already have big batteries on the site. It's just because it was just on private property paid for privately, there was no public process, like there was no public procurement, no public meetings. They're all over the place, like they're in most cities and most big sites. because they were using them for a few reasons, either as backup power rather than diesel generators, or they were, there's a way that big Class A customers are charged for power in Ontario where they could reduce those bills by putting batteries in and shifting their time of use beyond the scope of this conversation. But people should be aware that, like, if you have kids in college, university now, they're probably living or sitting right beside them. If you know people working in factories or working in hospitals or colleges or universities, they're already there. And also they're already in some locations in cities where they've used them. So again, just a consideration, like, the technology is relatively new compared to a lot of other things, but it's not that new.
Okay, so we're still taking questions for Electra. So this lady back here, and then Mike.
I think what our concern is you're talking about this technology being urban centers, not rural centers. You've brought forward a lot of examples. Our issue is the location and why the township is feeling the need to put a square peg in a round hole. You're saying that we have a waste management facility, so cancerous land potentially. So let's feed it with more, is what we're hearing. You said that there are systems in places to check this water to make sure it's okay. And then 2 seconds later, another sentence saying, but we really have no idea what's actually in there. So our concern, and I'm looking around the room, and it looks to be that I'm probably the next generation that is able to afford something here. I'm looking at moving my family here permanently. This is what we have to look forward to as a council that is more driven by money. If Electra is an amazing company for this, what if they don't get it? What if it's another company that isn't an amazing company that have this all in place? You are so hard up. You've said we have limited locations for this. Why are you as a township so hard up to try to put this here, not in an urban center? How many of these, you mentioned that there's a lot of these. They are not in a rural area between two lakes on water courses. Okay, we're not opposed to this technology. We know it has to exist. Why here? Why are you, as our council, who, not being, against anything here, but 20 years, that's probably the lifespan of many people in this room. What about us coming up?
You for that.
I'm not trying to be morbid. I am a healthcare worker. I am a nurse. So, I look around and I'm trying to represent the younger generation that is coming up. We're not opposed to this technology. I want you to be very clear about that. We're opposed to this specific location. So, sorry, to get to my question, why is this township appropriate? You're saying we only have limited locations, which the locations, quite frankly, probably are not the best. Why is this township so hard up when others have recognized that it is not safe for their community? And maybe it would be better where the supply and demand is, which is in an urban center, such as universities, colleges that have this technology, and the firefighting. I have family that are firefighters. They are petrified of something like this in this location.
Thank you for. I don't want to speak to the political comments, but thank you for the comments. I just want to say before the counselors should answer that, go easy on your counselors, because to put all of this in perspective, your counselors are reacting to a proposal that was brought to the community. That's their job. They didn't pick the location. So just bear that in mind as you're all forming your thoughts, to be fair to them. They didn't pick this location. They didn't pick this line to have capacity on it and be of interest to developers, and they didn't pick the site. They were approached with the site And they did the right thing. They called in all the experts and asked us all to help evaluate the proposal and bring expert information to the community because it was proposed on this site by Electra. There's no other site that's been proposed for them to be able to consider right now. I just want to say that for perspective to the poor elected officials that have to react, that they are in a reactive mode to something that was put to them, and their duty is to share it.
Enough for what you do. I guess what it is though is I've went through multiple pages of the official plan as well as the bylaws for this area. And the question is, why do you feel that this needs to happen in this township? Because the next question that and concern I have is council then, if another landowner comes forward, are you going to approve exceptions and amendments to bylaws to allow this to come into place so that another landowner can do this? Why this township? Why this project? Why not in a more appropriate urban center or even an area that isn't surrounded by a vast majority of land, which has a ton of trees down because of Derico that just recently happened within the last few years? It's a ticking time bomb if something does happen. And that's the part that I'm failing to understand, is why the township is so concerned about this happening here. And that, I don't think that question has been answered for us to feel confident in moving forward. And because it seems like this is a lot of talk about money. That's what it feels like to us, is that this is coming down to money. And is this about money? Why? We don't understand why you're so hard up to have it happen here. And then what means are bylaws going to change and the official plan change to try to have this move forward? It feels like there's an ulterior motive here and we're not understanding it.
So let me try and answer that. First of all, there is no ulterior motive. We have been approached by Electra as opposed to some other company. If we had been approached by another company, hopefully, or based on what our legal representative just said, they would advise us whether to move forward, even get this far with another organization. So we think we've chosen the best or one of the best offers. The financial benefit is very important to this particular council and should be to the township. We have a $7.2 million operating budget. It costs $30,000 plus to do 1 kilometer of gravel road and has to be done every 3 years. There are realities here. You know, we want to attract more people to come here. I'm not saying this is a work project or a job creation project, but it may have some economic benefit spin-offs. So I don't want to go down that road, but it will help us financially. It will provide some of the things we don't have. And when choosing the alternative land, it would have to be along the hydro corridor. So it could just end up being across the line in the next township or Addington Highlands or wherever. So this is an opportunity we need to look at seriously. If we weren't, we never would be doing this meeting or the other meetings. This is to let us listen to what you have to say. And we're trying to be as open-minded as we possibly can, dot all the I's and cross all the T's, best we can. Okay, so questions for Electra, Mike, and then this gentleman, Larry, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor. I think everyone knows that I am a proponent of economic development and job creation and additional businesses in the area. If this goes through, question for Electra, are you committing any use of resources from our local contractors, local businesses, local to engage our youth and our people who want to work? And the second part of the question to council, is there a possibility to allocate a certain amount of percentage for the work to go locally instead of everything coming in from the outside?
Electra, you're first.
Yeah, sure. So, great question. Typically when we build these projects, you know, Well, I'll, be frank, most of the manpower of these goes into the construction. There isn't a whole lot of full-time jobs, for example, in the operations and maintenance. They're designed to be pretty much, autonomous. There's going to be regular O&M work, of course, done, and people monitoring the site, that sort of thing. But when we engage with our EPC contractors who are responsible for building it, usually they are going to look at local construction resources and subcontractors in the regions that these sites are. It's just what's usually the most economically efficient, and we usually provide a state of preference for that as well, right? We want to be able to utilize as much as possible local workforce, local resources. But it also usually just makes economic sense. So in that sense, we would definitely try to do that as much as possible during construction. Same thing for operations. If we can utilize local resources, some of it's going to be specialized. The battery systems themselves, usually it's the manufacturers have their specialized service personnel that are going to do a portion of it. But when it comes to, site maintenance itself, we'd look to local resources again for things like that.
But no commitment, right?
So that
Just
It's hard to make a commitment now because it really depends on what's available locally.
So the community benefit agreement, part of that is intended to provide opportunities within the township. We haven't discussed how that would ever be applied. We're not even close to that yet. But perhaps we can turn some of that back in, set up public forums or whatever else, get a public committee set up, do stuff for the benefit of the population, do stuff to create jobs, attract younger people, and so on. It's a big picture. Okay, anybody else? This gentleman here. Oh, sorry, Brooke, Larry first, and then this gentleman, because he asked before. That's the only reason.
Thanks. I just want to pick up on one of the comments that somebody made, which was, the objection isn't to the technology. It's, in my case, it's more to do with timing than even the location. I mean, the location's a concern for some, but it's really comes down to about the timing. So I do have a question for Electra. You, Lisa, had made the comment, these things have been being installed for a decade, but these agreements are being done for 20 years, or more. And if you look back historically, the lifespan or the life cycle for wind turbines was supposed to be 20, 25 years. And yet you talk to a lot of the people, particularly companies that have crane operators, and they're out there replacing wind turbines after 8 to 10 years because they didn't meet that. You look at the EV scenario that we're in, and we've got some that sometimes work, sometimes don't, and all of the issue with that. It's new technology, it's newish technology. It's not new, it's been around for a while. But there's so many advancements that are being done here that from a timing perspective, frankly, like the EV chargers, would the township, and I understand there's lots of money on the table, lots of benefits from that, but would the township be better off, postponing it for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be, to see what the market determines is going to be, the winning technology. We've seen that. I mean, there's all kinds of new battery technology coming out that potentially has the potential to way outperform lithium batteries. So, it's more of the timing issue. So my question to Electra is, if you've been doing this for a decade, like, how do you know the stuff's going to last for 20 years or 25 years? Or actually, I should pose it as a question. What is the life cycle anticipated of the battery installations you're proposing for here?
Sure, I can speak to that. So I guess right off the top, we would be signing a 20-year contract with the ISO that would obligate us to provide certain services to the grid for 20 years. How we do that and how we take responsibility for making sure our assets are functioning and working, that really all becomes on us. There's penalties if we don't meet those requirements. So we have to take certain risks in terms of the performance of the technology, the longevity. So obviously that's a big incentive to us. In doing so, we make sure we work with big companies who are providing these, who are going to be around for the long duration, who can provide warranties on equipment, who can provide, who have the right network of service personnel. You're right, 20 years from now, battery technology may look very different. And, when the first 20-year contract expires, if there's an opportunity to continue to operate the site, there may be some sort of repowering. That's pretty typical with respect to any sort of energy project. You put fixed infrastructure in, you've got to maintain it, but at some point you might have to invest in renewing it. So all I can really say is the opportunity exists now. The procurement itself and the timing is dictated by the ISO. It's not really up to us. It's not up to the township. So it's the question of, do we participate in this opportunity? Those projects are going to be awarded, and when the window is closed, the window is closed. So there is, like was mentioned, this is a multi-year procurement by the ISO. There will be other opportunities, but this particular opportunity and the timing is really defined by the ISO, and we've got to put forward the best project we can with the best technology that's currently available.
Thank you. Brooke, gentleman in the red jacket, please.
While you're walking, I'll just say, with each passing window that goes by, and I'll teach you, the lines will get more used up. So that's a factor. And then the other factor is, even though Electra will bid now, I don't know, when would you look at procuring or choosing the technology? Like, it wouldn't necessarily be right yet. So there's still time, right, as they assess the supply chain and the technologies before they actually would pull the trigger on when to buy what product for what project.
Yeah, likely there'd be a year or so just in the permitting process. And it would be after that we would start to put out orders for delivery that are sort of a year out, call it a year out from that. So, when we're talking to suppliers right now, we're talking about what is your product platform that you're looking at for over the next couple of years. Obviously we want something that's gone through all of the testing and all the certification. So it is going to be sort of representative of what they're currently advertising. But the industry moves quickly. So even projects that were commissioned in the last few years, most of the manufacturers have already made advancements, made improvements to their offerings, and we're looking to take advantage of those latest technologies.
Okay, now your turn.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jim Hallman from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but up here for a month every year. One of the things that hasn't really been mentioned, at least that I know of, is the lighting, the outside perimeter lighting. We value very highly being able to go out and look at the stars. And we're getting more and more lighting where it's harder and harder sometimes to see those stars. So what are the lighting, outside lighting guidelines or what you would envision at this site? Thank you.
Electra, please.
Yeah, sure. So because it's not a manned facility, we would be looking at emergency lighting or lighting that we would need while having service personnel on site. Usually that's not going to be at night. So that's really the short answer is it be confined to emergency lighting. There wouldn't be any lighting that was on all the time every night, for example.
Okay, any additional questions for Electra? You, sir.
Brian Lorimer, Mississauga. Assuming this project goes through, what's your estimation of time for its completion, start to finish, and what sort of disruptions, infrastructure-wise, will we be able to anticipate?
Electra?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, if the projects are awarded, and for example, if we were to submit this window, we'd be looking at sometime in the spring. Then a year from that would probably be completing all of the necessary permitting and approvals. So construction would begin maybe at its earliest a year from next spring. Construction timelines itself should be within 12 months, ideally a lot less than that. Probably actual on-site work, can be completed in, say, 4 to 6 months, that sort of thing. In terms of disruption to services, there shouldn't really be any disruption. I think the biggest local impacts, that you would see is obviously a little more traffic in terms of vehicles coming onto site, and we would work closely with the municipality to make sure that we're looking at traffic plans and how to manage that accordingly. But that's kind of I guess, a high level view. Hopefully that answers the question in a broad way.
Anyone else? What? Yes, sir.
Hi, Lauren Fleeler, Mississauga Lake. Lisa has said that the proposal for the site was presented to the council by Electra. I'm wondering, did Electra look at any other sites in the township? Or did they just say, well, like every other township in the province, this township needs money, so we'll present to them and kind of dangle the carrot? Or were the other sites looked at?
Electra, could you answer that question?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, leading up to this, we actually did a very extensive land search across all of Ontario, not only for this, but we've been active in the energy procurement side of what the ISO is doing as well, looking at opportunities for things like solar. So this is just one aspect, and as part of that, really what we're looking at, first of all, is where are the interconnection points that have capacity, and so that is the hydro lines that are identified by the ISO as being able to host. The next thing we're really looking for is where are there municipalities that would be open to these types of projects. So obviously there's lots of land in Ontario. One of the issues here is the constraints of the timeline. We have to basically get all the agreements in place, get site control within a very defined period of time, as well as undergo all the municipal engagement and community engagement like we're doing now. So we reached out to a number of different municipalities across the province on different projects. And when we engaged with North Frontenac and asked them, do you have any locations that you feel might be suitable? We brought up this site and we looked at it, and as a result, we've gone down that pathway. We went down that pathway on some other sites and didn't end up feeling that they were as suitable. So it's really putting our best foot forward in terms of what's available, and hopefully working with we have to work with a municipality that is willing, and that's kind of the process we're in now. And obviously we've talked a lot about the perceived risks and impacts, and no infrastructure project is without its impacts. But certainly want to underscore that there's a lot of benefits. The direct benefits we've talked about, yes, a lot of it's financial, but the reality is the province needs these resources. The ISO wants them to be located in diverse areas. Frankly, they cannot locate all of these projects in urban areas. The interconnection capacity is already constrained, and they need to site these elsewhere in the province. There's already an incentive to place things in northern areas. So they're really looking for these, a set of distributed energy resources across the province, rather than, for example, building a large gas plant, which is really that's the technology that we're competing with in terms of what this is doing for the grid. The alternative to having these is more gas on the system. And so, when we talk about things like climate change, I mean, our view is this is one of the technologies that's enabling us to put more renewables on the grid and have a cleaner energy infrastructure, which is important for everybody's future. Nobody necessarily wants them right in their backyard, just like nobody wants wind turbines in their backyard. But the reality is they do have to go somewhere, and we're just looking for the best possible location that has the benefits outweigh the potential impacts.
Okay, thank you for that. Brooke, gentleman right here, and then Larry.
David, this question's directly for you. As this area is a tourist area, there's obviously a season of time that is most important to the resorts because that is when all their business comes into the area. The question is can the township work with you to figure out the time that would be least disruptive for construction, as that site is filled with lots of rock and there's going to be lots of explosions and detonating and blowing up the rock and then removing all of that rubble to create a level site? Is there a way you can work with the township to devise when that would be that wouldn't impact the local resorts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we'd certainly be looking to hear from the municipality as to what those concerns were and what guidelines they would have when we're putting together our construction plan. And we'd have to look at exactly what those types of impacts would be, what construction methods are being used, what the traffic levels are, and understand if there's any concerns from the municipality, and then we'd be happy to discuss them.
So I've got Larry, and I have a gentleman in the back. Gentleman right here, agree?
I just want to get clarification because I'm sure I read somewhere, and it might have been a Frontenac News thing, but that it was reported that this actually wasn't an unsolicited proposal out of the blue, but that it had actually, Electra had been requested to submit a proposal by either, I don't know, either council officially or councilors unofficially. I don't know, but can you clarify that? And I guess that's either a question for you, Mr. Mayor, or for Electra. Were you requested to submit a proposal to North Frontenac?
Mayor didn't request anything, however.
I didn't say the mayor specifically.
Sure, Mayor did not request anything here. We do have an environmental task force and an economic development task force. And as part of that, they look for potential business opportunities for the municipality. And I'm quite sure when we started this, no one ever thought this would come along. We were usually thinking a much smaller scale. This one is very large. There's potential to be very large and obviously very impactful. This is not building 3 houses down the road. This is big. So. Was this your committee, John? Or was it your committee, Roy? Economic development, environment.
This came out of the environmental task force. We were looking for projects to begin with. We created a subcommittee that Deputy Mayor Ingles is running. So that's where it came up. We were just looking for opportunities to see where it would go.
So you're saying that once that was identified, you requested them to submit a proposal?
Or start the proposal.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Just wanted to clarify that.
There's a lot of water under the bridge since that occurred. The gentleman in the very back?
So my question is for Electra. Just wanted to know, are you planning to build another site like this somewhere else in rural Ontario? If there is one actually already built, where are those locations if we want to get in touch with the locals over there to know how happy they are? Thanks.
So we're looking at a number of different sites right now. The sites that we have had that are under construction right now, I'd say aren't so much in rural areas. They're closer in proximity to cities. So two of them are in Vaughan, just outside of Toronto, and the other one in Guelph. So we have not ourselves, built a rurally sited battery system, but there are a number in Ontario that have been built in different communities, including more rural communities.
What, this gentleman here, then this lady here.
Roy Perkin, Browns Bay. If this project goes through and the building is made and everything's in use, is there any containment just in case there is a spill or just in case some idiot puts water over this thing, or it does catch fire and we're in the middle of a huge storm where there is loads of runoff, is there any containment?
Electra?
Yeah, so we look at containment where there's, specifically something on site there to contain. So for example, if we put in as part of the interconnection there, typical utility transformers can be oil-filled transformers. Often we'll do a secondary containment in there just in case if there's an oil leak from the transformer, we know the volumes there, we know what needs to be done to contain it. When it comes to runoff, that's generally dealt with through the stormwater management plan of the site that looks at, what type of stormwater we might be looking at. To my understanding, the planning process, the design process doesn't generally look at instances of fire water containment, just because, this is really a contingency sort of emergency measure. We don't really know, if the fire department is going to use water, how much they're going to use. I just want to note in our discussions with the fire department, we've talked about what is kind of the guidance right now on these technologies, which is not to use water for this very reason. Generally, the systems nowadays are designed to contain any sort of fire locally on site and allow it to burn out. And as long as the system is designed and installed in the correct way, then that shouldn't have any it shouldn't have any additional exposure to anything surrounding the system, and that's kind of what the fire department will be most concerned with. So our understanding is that's not going to be the practice here, and therefore, we wouldn't necessarily be able to look to contain any sort of fire or water runoff above and beyond what we're already doing on the site to mitigate any issues with things like surface water and stormwater.
Okay, is there anyone else before I go? The gentleman back here. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, pardon me, this lady at the front here, then the gentleman back there, and then this other lady.
Hi, I'm Cindy Davidson. I'm a resident of North Frontenac, a full-time resident of North Frontenac. We've talked a lot about the benefits to the community, how much revenue is coming in. I know we're not privy to that, but has anything come up that's going to cost the taxpayer? Expenses to the community at this point and projected in the future?
Well, our legal fees for sure. This is not cheap.
I thought Electra was gonna cover those.
Good point.
That gets negotiated. No, there's no payments going the other way in the option agreement or the lease or the community benefits agreement. But it's a good question, like, are there any other non-monetary obligations or commitments? I mean, the thing foremost on my mind when I saw those legal agreements is you're already dealing with an adjacent contaminated site. So that's an existing known cost and liability on an ongoing basis to the municipality. That needed to be managed in the legal agreements, and it was in the drafts. They're not signed yet, but just in the drafts. And this was, merits consideration as a source of funding to help with that situation. Actually, I think that's why I'm listening so intently to everything said here today, because one of the elephants in the room is the existing contamination and the long-term plan for that layered in with, I would assume, an ongoing desire for economic development in a smart, sensible way, an ongoing desire to not see taxes increase, stuff like that. And when I look at those three things together, I think that's why this all merits consideration. That's what we've been trying to manage, and I believe have been managed in the draft legal agreement, should you wish to proceed, that the money's coming one way.
Great question, really is. Darwin, do you remember what the projected lifespan of that particular site is? 40 years?
Yeah, based on available space and the current usage annually, it's 44 years.
44 years. So it is what it is. Okay, I forgot where I was going. The gentleman in the back.
This question is for Lisa. I'm so sorry, I just don't, I know you presented yourself and give us a little bit of background, but what's your, who are you working for exactly? How, is there any connection between you and Electra to, so can you just give us a little bit more?
I'm hired by the township. I work for the township, only for the township. And my background is at a big Bay Street law firm, top firm in Canada, and I have worked on the other side, on the developer side for all the biggest, best developers in Canada. I've done lots of project development work. I switched sides when I moved back here in 2010. I switched sides. So I don't act for the big developers anymore. And I act now for local communities and local.
There's no conflict of interest between you and Electra, and there's nothing that
No,
of
when
the sort.
sorry, I should have not joked about that. Maybe when I made the joke about them paying for legal fees, it is standard in Ontario and important, in my opinion, that when developers come to town and ask people to take time out of their lives to consider these proposals, they need legal advice, and the developers should be paying for some or all of that legal advice, usually some to a reasonable amount. They should be paying for that. I don't want to speak to exact dollars, but that is the concept, and that is a fair concept, that they would contribute to reimbursement of reasonable legal fees, and it's something that does get discussed and is being discussed.
Okay, so the lady with her hand up, and then this gentleman at the end. In the middle. I'm terrible with names. It's just easier to point, and I apologize for it. So the dollar sign in front of it, obviously don't forget it, but what comes the names, not good.
Okay, Suzanne again, and I guess really more of a comment now based on what we've just learned, and I'm really quite dismayed. The presentation started with the fact that you were approached, you made no selections, you were given a proposal to consider, and that's what you're doing on our behalf, when clearly it's come to light that you requested it. And it would seem that everything here, and right from the start, you were saying how this is going to be a new way forward for the township. And it's the ideal location. To me, what I have heard is, especially now that I know that you've requested this proposal, which both of you had said was not the case. You absolutely did not present it that way. Is that, this is just kind of a dog and pony show to justify that you've done a consultation and that you've already made up your mind, and really you're wasting our time. And it's, I think, very disrespectful.
Gentleman at the end. Oh, right behind you.
Yes, Lisa and David, you guys just told us that these sites are everywhere, right? They're all over the place. You've had them built for 10 years. Now, I was just wondering, is there anything within an hour's drive of here that we could actually physically go down and look at, listen to, see, smell, sniff, whatever, to get a general idea of what this project is?
I'd have to do a little bit of research to see, what's located near North Frontenac. I certainly Electra, we do not currently have sites within an hour. Like I said, we've got 3 that are under construction right now in Vaughan and Guelph. We have some smaller sites as well that are more behind the meter. And I think, to further add color, I think to Lisa's comments, there's been a large number of these systems, anywhere from a megawatt to 10 megawatts that have been used in conjunction with a lot of industrial customers in Ontario. What we're seeing now is the emergence of these larger grid scale projects. And these are projects that in the last few years have just started to come online. So, the Oneida project is one that maybe you've heard of, which is, about 1,000 megawatt hours in southwestern Ontario. So I think, there are projects that are being proposed and are going ahead in all sorts of areas. I do encourage you to look up where these might be, and certainly we will make opportunities, and we have already discussed with the township here an opportunity to visit some of our sites. Just coordinating the timing of that, given that they're currently in the under construction phase right now. But certainly by the time we would be in a position to go forward through the development process of these, we would have operating sites that the municipality could view and tour.
I think a lot of us are still iffy on it. And would you consider, and township consider, a 30 to 60-day deferral on the next Friday's deadline?
The problem with that is, well, we can, but the problem is they have to have this done by December if they're going to go forward with it, and they're running out of time. If it's available, and if they decide to do it. So, I mean, it's kind of a, what do we do?
Yeah, make 26.
That would be up to Electra.
Electra?
Well, it is, Electra. Okay. Kelly at the back, please.
Thank you, everybody. My name's Kelly Willis. I just had a couple of questions. One, in this situation, Mayor, your strong mayor powers, could you not just kind of choose to accept the proposal and go forward?
In the name of economic development, I could.
Okay.
Under the name of what I've said previously, I will not.
Okay. The other thing is it common practice to pass a bylaw in 3 readings in one sitting?
For us, it is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, I also sit on the county council and they do that as well. It's a little different process, but they do as well, yes. So this gentleman here hasn't said anything all day, so I want to make sure if he gets an opportunity. Brooke, can I bring the mic up here, please? We're not paying Brooke by the kilometer.
Hi, my name's Richard Pickett. I live in North Frontenac as well. And everybody in North Frontenac knows about the deal that we've had with Hydro One about our EV chargers and all the charges. We're going to be connecting up to their lines, are we not? Is this battery project not going to be connecting up the Hydro One line? What kind of safeguards are in place to see that we don't get it again, like we got it with the EV chargers?
Electra has the pleasure of the interconnection agreement with Hydro One.
We can talk about the EV thing later. I'll never win the argument. I know that, but.
It's all on Electra, and they'll be trying to figure that out and risk manage that too, because it's probably just a range right now.
All right. You're on.
So I actually want to help answer a question from earlier about if there's any of these sites close by that we could go visit. The closest site, as David mentioned, was the Oneida out by Toronto, which is a 250 megawatt system, which is significantly larger in output power, but actually smaller than the site that we're being proposed here, which is 11,100 and, sorry, it's 1.12 gigawatts of power that is being stored here. The closest place we could go to actually visit a site that size would be in Arizona or California.
We'd also be looking at somebody else's site too. Okay, so sorry, back row, the lady with the glasses and the red top.
I'm Eileen Fleeler. I've lived in North Frontenac for 70 years. Most of those 70 years within a 5-minute walk of the 506 resite. I'm not happy with the thought of this facility going in that close to my home. I know everybody's saying not in my backyard. For me, it literally is my backyard. And I'm not happy with the thought. I think that a certain amount of research would come up with a better site than the one that is proposed.
Thank you. Okay. Well, sorry. Oh, I'm gonna go this way and then Rob.
I just wonder if any members of council or on any task force has visited a best site, maybe the one in Toronto, or have plans to visit the site to see for themselves.
There was an opportunity to visit one this week, but it got canceled. But it's part of our plan.
We're trying to schedule one for next week. It's either a Tuesday or Wednesday.
No. Okay, so Mr. Lesperance over here, please.
So on this side of the table, we're looking at all of the financial gains and the goalposts that one way or another, whether it's this project or the next project, we want to achieve as a community to grow. So then on this side of the table, at what point does the petition that has been put out in, I think it's been 8 days. So for all intents and purposes, let's say that the permanent population of North Frontenac is 2,500 to 3,000 people. In 8 days, we have almost a quarter of that saying no. So at what point do we have to have a goalpost for us to bring to you to say no?
Okay. Anybody else? Well, that's for council to decide. There's 9,800 people in the province, or sorry, in Township of North Frontenac. There's 2,400 permanent residents. The 7,000 extra residents are from out of, they live elsewhere. They're here for the seasonal. Okay. So the problem with the petition is we don't know where some of them come from. We do respect there's a lot of people against it. Well, I have not seen any of that yet. Okay. So, and I won't get into my other problem, but the cell tower in Snow Road had 200 people against it. 2 were from the area. So we're always wary of this stuff. Well, it's just something to think about. So we're trying to do this, council's trying to listen to what you have to say. This isn't helping. The fact that it came, this is good, but they have it thrown on my desk, Rob, is not appropriate. So I would appreciate it, a little more decorum. But other than that, this is for us to look at. Right, but okay, all right, anyway, so the lady in the back.
Has anybody looked into the neighboring areas, why they shut this project down? Why are we going ahead when 3 neighboring areas don't want to have anything to do with it? We're the land of lakes. Don't we want to protect that?
Central Frontenac, according to the Frontenac News, and talking to one counselor, in less than a blink of an eye, signed a municipal agreement with a proponent for 6 large biofuel powered wind turbines. South Frontenac, there's a lot more to that story than we don't know, or that, we aren't aware of. It was a 5-4 vote, I believe. The mayor cast the final vote. But it was a different technology than here. We're very leery of, going forward. We understand, and we're trying to do this right if we do it. And council will have the final say, and next Friday should do it, or they elect to defer it. Well, I'm sorry, but There's no other place that we know of in North Frontenac that would do it. Or that would be suitable along that power line. Remember, it's got to be along a power line. Okay, back up the truck here a bit. I want to go back to Kelly first, and I'm going to go to you and then you, and we're starting to go around in circles here with this.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, the point was that you said that we could elect to defer?
That's
What would that, how would that happen?
Well, there's a resolution for council the next meeting, which is next Friday, to discuss. And council can elect during that. I haven't seen the resolution yet, but it will probably come up that we're in favor of it, and we can say no or yes, or we can amend it, and that would be the deferral. Okay, that's how it's done. And I'm kind of out of my element here because I have a clerk that always, and Val and Brooke, that always keep me in line for this stuff. And during the meeting, you'll sometimes see me talk to them to make sure we get it right. Okay? This gentleman.
Thank you again. Question for Electra and maybe for Lisa as well. Regarding the presentation of your company, we've been told that you are top notch, like according to what you said. But again, I go back, I ask you if there's any other rural builds like this, and you say no, only Guelph and Toronto. So we are asked to trust, like blindly. I mean, we're following you. You're telling us it's amazing company, top notch, but then they don't have any experience building this kinds of facility in rural area. It looks like it's only, is there like any things that they have to put in place because they're building in a specific protective biodiversity is very, very important. Hey, they're bringing that experience from the city. That's great. But here it's going to be totally different. Maybe, I don't know. I'm assuming it could be completely different and the standard should be much higher. But you told us this top-notch company, they don't have experience building in rural area.
Yeah, there's two things I can help clarify if I should. I said, I know that many have been built for the past 10 years in Ontario on private sites that were not procured by the government. So those are where what we call load customers are, like big power users. So a lot of them would happen to be in cities because that's where a lot of big load customers are. So you couldn't probably go visit those. You may incidentally be able to see them, but they're on private property at factories or they're at colleges, universities and whatnot all around. So they could be in rural areas. Some would be if you looked at a map of Ontario, and some would be in the cities. Those are all private. So that's the answer to one part of the question, like where are these things right now? There's another set though, and that's what we call the utility scale ones. And that's the maybe the bigger ones that are maybe more than 10 or 20 megawatts. And they are meant to be connected to the grid itself, like as an asset on the grid. And those will, by definition, more so be in the rural areas, just because the government has a need and a policy direction and new laws saying that they want them distributed around Ontario where there is grid capacity. The reason why there's not very many of those to go see yet close by is because the government only started procuring them very late in 2023 and into 2024. So they just finished construction, even the very first ones. That's why Oneida is an example. I think Oneida was the first one in Ontario. I also think it's bigger than this, but Electra will have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think Oneida is bigger than this proposal, but I understand it depends on how you measure the energy. But yeah, but I think anyways, Electra can answer that. Most of the ones that were awarded contracts in 2024 are in construction right now. So that's why, that's the answer. Like they're just still in construction or some of them will be close to being done. So you'll start seeing more around as they finish up construction. I literally would have to look at a map. It is public information. I could help people here with that map if you want, or there's a few people in the room that probably could. I just don't want to say off the top of my head the status of each because there's a whole bunch in construction right now. But when the IESO granted those contracts out of ELT1 and LT1, they're published. So you can go on the IESO website and look at who won LT1 contracts. It was some natural gas turbines and batteries.
Okay. Yes, sir. Hang on, where's, there we go. Thanks, Brooke.
I'm James Jeffries. I own and live at the property that just abuts the proposed area for this. So I can empathize with everybody here with all their concerns. This gentleman with the stars, I love my stars. This gentleman with the sound, I can hear talking from the dump at my backyard. Miss Fleeler here saying it's in her backyard. I agree. It's literally, this beauty will be the view from my picture window if it gets put in its proposed spot. Use all the area, the crown land that abuts the township dump. And I own the property, obviously, up to that point. So I'm quite familiar with the layout and the lines. So a question or a number that hasn't really come up. We talked about this minimum 10 acres, and then there was with setbacks a proposed need of 44 acres, which Dave up there, I do believe it's Dave, said that that number did not seem needed or was too much. I'm just curious, how much property does the township actually own right there? And what percentage or acres of that owned property is already used up in the dump itself or the layout for all the dump?
Corey or Jarwin?
Township owns 109 acres there. I think about 15 of it is occupied with the current waste site, licensed site.
Okay. So there's 44.5 being initially considered for this, of which they may only use 10. Okay. All right. So, okay.
Thank you, Gary. This is actually not a negative comment. This is a community future question. Are there other positives that could come from this project in our backyard? I want to note the April 25th Environmental Task Force that noted that there was a potential for location-based hydro rates, and that this project itself could change our rates and lower our rates for hydro in North Frontenac. Would that be something for the entire community, or would that be just for here? And then the other question I have, okay, this one's a good one then.
Yeah, that's a concept in CBAs. I love that concept. It's a thing across North America. It's just really hard to pull off in real life, and probably not realistic here to reduce your power bills, because you would all be Hydro One customers here. And that's just, Hydro One's not going to tinker with that. They're just not. They're rate regulated province-wide. So the question becomes, with the CBA money that would come into the community, what do you as a community decide together are the appropriate uses of that extra money? That's the question. I don't think it would go directly on your power bills, but you could notionally agree some of them that goes to that. That's a community decision.
And Gary, the other question I have is more hypothetical, but we know that there is a lot of power on that line that is currently untapped. And it has to sit in the back of my mind is, could this specific project be better for the township than, say, an AI data center coming into the township and using that same power? So if we take and lock that power up with Electra, would that help prevent or protect our township from future large projects like this?
Based on what I've heard across the country, there's no chance an AI data center is going to come here, because the load requirements are like out of this world. Like nobody even knows where to put any. And does this project preclude something like that? No. Does this project preclude enhance a future type of economic development that would need load, would have a demand for power? Yes, it would help. I don't know if anywhere around here is load constrained right now or not. I really don't know, but I do know in Kingston, there's areas that are load constrained. And in many areas of the province, it's really tight right now. And it is a throttle on economic development. So at a certain point, it starts to become real. Maybe not here right now, but there are more assets needed on the grid all over the place.
So I attended a conference, and when I go, I try to pay attention to this stuff. And the comments that I'm hearing from the presenters are that by 2050, Ontario will need enough power generation, additional power generation, power the city the size of Toronto 5 times over. That's the projection. Will we get there? I don't know. But you got to start. You're looking at 5 years here maybe to get from A to B. And we're already into this 4 to 6 months. So it's a long time. Well, another nuclear reactor. Thank you very much. So and those take, what did you say this morning, 10 to 20 years?
Ironically, regardless of how you feel about nuclear, ironically, because of the provincial policies for care nuclear, that is why we are having conversations right now about batteries, because even the SMRs, small modular reactors, like even if they say they're going to take 5 to 10 years to build, like they're still a ways away. They still could be 10 years away before they come on the system. And I don't think any of us in this room know, but we presume they'll take longer than expected. And yeah.
Hang on. Larry, come on.
That's
Okay.
a great question though. And the answer is, we have a massive amount of baseload supply in Ontario, for many hours of the night, actually too much because the nukes, you can't ramp them up and down. They're massive baseload. And so Ontario, it's more important than other jurisdictions to have the load shifting, which is why the batteries are so sensible for the Ontario supply mix, because you can store when it's cheap in the middle of the night and deploy in the peaks in the summer afternoons and whatnot. Yeah. That's why they're procuring both generation and capacity.
The one in Central Frontenac, those turbines I talked about, if that ever goes through, that would be a power generation. As opposed, this, I see it as maximizing the current power supply that we've got, maximizing its use and its efficiency. Which is kind of, that's one of the reasons for doing it, but that isn't talking about what it is here. Okay, better words. I won't argue with you. Okay.
Yeah, if this is such a great and wonderful technology and a great idea, why hasn't OPG brought it up 10 years ago?
There were no utility scale batteries affordable enough 10 years ago. This is really like, we're just, this is early days for utility scale batteries worldwide. And, it's been ramping up the last 10 years. And here we are now, we're in the point where it competes. It competes as a technology utility scale.
So we're the experiment.
OPG is bidding. OPG is involved in this.
Well, for what I've heard so far and what I've seen so far, you guys have done a great presentation. Thank you for having us all here. And I don't know, Electra could probably answer this, but from all of what I've heard so far and the safeguards that you're putting into this project and that, it really isn't too much far off the mark than a regular OPG switch station someplace.
Electra, do you have a response to that, or you want to comment on that comment?
So I'm not sure I heard the last part of that question. Is the question kind of how much different is this in terms of infrastructure than sort of a utility switching station?
Yeah, basically. I mean, there's some giant switch stations out there that pose bigger problems than what you're proposing. From what I've heard so far, you probably up to their standards.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, in a lot of ways, this is going to be very similar to a typical sort of substation that you would see as part of electrical infrastructure. A lot of the same equipment in terms of, visual impact, noise impact. We're talking about things that are similar. Obviously, the presence of the batteries is what makes it unique. And, the fact that it is a relatively new technology, understand that, why people are concerned. It's the kind of thing where by the time that these have been around for 20, 30 years and are in every community, then, nobody's going to blink an eye. So I completely understand. But, really, I do want to sort of reassure that the industry has got to a very mature point in terms of the standards by which these technologies are built to, the standards and practices around things like fire protection. Even some of the instances that we're in, have been in the news the last 5 years or so. These are earlier generations of technologies. There's been a lot of learnings, and we're really at a point where the industry is quite mature in terms of understanding the best ways to go about building these, manufacturing them, putting them online. And a lot of that has to do, a lot of the maturity in the industry when it comes to the utility scale batteries has to do with how the EV market has taken off. And so when you think about the volumes of lithium ion batteries that are everywhere around the world, in our devices, in automobiles, it is a very well known and understood technology. It's finding a new use for it because now the economics are there to use it in this way, and it represents a viable alternative to fossil fuels, which we're trying to get away from.
There's a couple people online may have their hand up. Kelly, I want to ask if they have any comments for Electra or for anybody else.
Yeah, so the first person, it just says Zoom user, so please go ahead.
Let's go to the next one.
The person that registered as Zoom user. Okay, we will go to the next person. It would be Donald Morton.
Welcome back, Donald.
Thank you. Not really a question here, more just building off the positive comment about the future the gentleman made there. As someone who also represents the younger generation, being only 38, there's a big elephant in the room. We do hold a great fear that's not being talked about so much. Our population in North Frontenac is declining year on year. 65 and up represents 60% of our population. So combined with property taxes going up 2% year on year for the next 10 years, 20% increase. We do see this as something really to consider if we want to be a viable township and community in 20 years. God forbid the whole dissolvence of our township purely because we can't handle the exorbitant taxes. This has already happened in Northern Ontario to a number of townships. They've lost their whole towns because there's not enough young people to carry the burden of taxes. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That 2% he talked about, that's just the asset management piece. 2% a year. Like right now, so every municipality in Ontario by July had to come up with an asset management plan and decide how to fund it. We were $1 million plus behind the 8 ball every year. And that is good compared to many other municipalities. So on your taxes every year for the next 10 years at least, you will see a 2% increase, and that's strictly for roads and bridges. And I'm telling you, we are very fortunate compared to some of the others. So we're looking at tax increases, 5%, 6%, whatever. The OPP cost is over $1 million a year. And we have almost no say in how that's calculated out. So we don't have a lot of discretion. And I don't want, it's going to come out the wrong way. I know, but I'm going to say it anyway. So this community benefit agreement, or whatever that is, the additional funds and so on, we can use for the benefit of the community. We can create facilities that people will want to come here. They want to stay. They want to build a house, raise a family. We've got to start somewhere. People talk about affordable housing. Yes. People talk about economic development. Yes. But we've got to have something. We've got to be able to support that. And it's gotta be within reason. It just can't be, we want a 500-unit subdivision sitting here. Cause it's on land that may be fine, but it's, how do we support that? You know, and then does the horse come first or does the cart, whatever, and so on. So we're trying to struggle with this. So we are a very small municipality in basically the middle of nowhere. We're trying to make this work or make a conscientious decision that's educated for the benefit of everybody. We all live here. So, you know, need to bear with us and whatever we, you know, some of you will like our decision. Some of you will absolutely hate it. And that's democracy. Sorry. You know, well, it's the majority.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's a hard thing to talk about.
Well, we can argue that for the day. Anyway. So that's where we're at. That's why we're holding this particular meeting. We held 2 others. We have engaged Frontenac. We're doing the best we can to reach you and so on. What, you know, at some point in time, we come to the point where we have to make a decision. And that decision time is next Friday. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, I'm just going to entertain a few more. It's 2:40. Kelly? The Councilor Good has to leave. He apologizes for that. So.
Yes, the question was, I know that there was kind of a form letter that was sent to some of the counselors through emails. I'm just wondering if those were taken into consideration with the voting with regards from the people.
From my perspective, every letter that I got or received, I went through it and then forwarded on to the office here. And I believe all or almost all of the people that sent those letters in received acknowledgement from us that we have it. Most of them were based on the petition that's circulating, so we know what that is. There were some that were really unique. And so we have seen them.
Sorry, I was just thinking, we're talking about numbers, and I know that each counselor represents a portion of the population. So I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of taken into consideration. Thank you.
All right, folks. Okay. Okay, Electra?
This might be a little bit premature, but I know it'll be a year or so out before you firm up the technology. But have you considered nickel zinc or zinc air type technology that utilize a water-based electrolyte system as opposed to a solvent type system like lithium iron phosphate?
Yeah, good question. So obviously there's a number of different battery chemistries that are currently kind of at different stages. You know, 5 years ago, nickel, magnesium, and cobalt was really sort of the de facto lithium ion technology. Now, lithium iron phosphate has sort of taken over. But really, from our perspective, our goal would be to look to you know, offerings in the technology space that are well proven, well established, and with companies we know are gonna be around for the long term, just like we are. So we would look to any viable alternatives, you know, that sort of check those boxes. Right now, just because of the scale in the industry, lithium iron phosphate is kind of the main battery chemistry that we'd be looking towards, but certainly keeping an eye on anything that's evolving in the future.
There are certainly a couple of Canadian companies that are involved in the zinc space and that I'm familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be a question for Electra as well. Just I'm just trying to put a visual of a footprint for this thing in my mind here, probably selfishly, just since it's in my backyard. Obviously, the location is super important to be on that line and very close or under it. What are the maximum setbacks that you can put this up in that line? I'm just wondering whether the backside of the township's 100 acres is even applicable acreage, or is it out of distance per se?
Yeah, so, you know, like I said, the site itself, and we think 10 acres is kind of the max. Right now, just, you know, indicatively, we've asked suppliers to put together layouts of the size of system we're looking at, and the battery modules themselves would occupy in these cases around 6 acres. We are required to be set back about 100 meters from the power corridor itself. And then we're also know that there are some wetlands in, you know, further behind and towards the lake. So for practical reasons, we'll probably have the site, it's going to be sort of sandwiched, you know, between those two things. And the site itself is probably not going to extend, you know, more than, you know, 100 or 200 meters sort of deep, or let's say, 300 meters from the power line corridor. Hopefully that answers
Was your
question.
final answer there? Was it 1, 2, or 300 meters? It's pretty important.
Yeah, so like I said, we're not going to be able to give you definitive answers on the dimensions of the system or the location, but we are required to be 100 meters set back from the power line. So within about 300 meters of the power line would be sort of the extent of the site, because we're also constrained on the other side from wetlands. The actual exact locations are things that we would have to identify further in our site evaluations that would be ongoing. But, you know, we believe the site has enough lands to accommodate, at very least the 10 acres, which is the maximum that we would need, while ensuring that we've got the right setbacks.
So some of the questions, sorry, thank you all for your comments. Some of your points, we're going to try and see if we can put them into the lease. That will be up to our legal team to actually make that work for us, and then to Electra to agree to, and us to agree to. Just once again, we are not approving a system. We are approving whether or not we issue a letter supporting the application for the system. Even if that goes ahead, then all the tests have to be done. They have to meet all the requirements. And maybe even there's a slight ability to move it on the site and so on. We don't know that yet. But we're just trying the best we can, and there's so many variables. You know, we're not experts. We don't have $200 million budget where we can hire $200,000 experts and have them in-house for X, Y, and Z. So it is what it is. Thank you so much for participating in this. If we could have this for every council meeting without this long question and answer period, that would be great. But we urge you to pay attention to us and tell us what you think. Our email addresses and phone numbers are on the township website. Use them. We're here for you. We're here to listen to what you say. Like I said earlier, you may not like the decision we end up making, or you may like it. We'll have to live with that. We're all members of Township of North Frontenac as well. So thank you. So Brooke, we go on to the next section. Bylaw.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Inglis, seconded by Councillor Hutto. Be it resolved that bylaw 2025-45, being a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council for its special meeting held October 24th, 2025, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Final comments from council? In favor? Carried. Sorry. Adjournment?
Moved by Councillor Hudel, seconded by Deputy Mayor Inglis. Be it resolved that council adjourns the meeting at 2:48 p.m. until October 31st, 2025, or at the call of the chair.
In favor? Thank you one and all.